No sign of Tina.
Oh, yes, we'll be using that tonight.
Was she a planned, oh, I love it when we can look in the
That's
parking
my
lot.
phone,
She's
because
running.
it'll probably go off.
Helps with the glare, the cameras.
Is these probably the developer, or was it the town? So I know in a sense, I go through here all the time.
Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. April 11th, 2022, Apex Planning Board. I'm going to do the invocation, so please bow your heads. Father God, thank you for this opportunity to come together as a town, as a staff, and a planning board for what is right for the town of Apex. Help us to have the wisdom for the decisions that we need to make today in regards to this town, and continue to bless us. In your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So this public comment, the purpose of public comment is to allow the public to speak on items that do not appear in the agenda on the public hearings. Any member of the public wishing to comment on public hearing items will be called at the appropriate time later in the agenda. The public comment period is an opportunity for the public to express concerns or opinions, but is not intended to be a question and answer session. During public comment, the public may comment on any non-public hearing item included, new business items that appear in this agenda. Comments from the public on new business items will not be taken later in the agenda, so if you wish to speak on the new business items, public comment is the time to do so. Also, comments must be limited to 3 minutes. When the 3 minutes is up, the speaker will be asked to wrap up their comments. If there are a large number of speakers for one particular item, it would be helpful if a representative could be selected to speak for the entire group. If not, comments on a single topic should not be repetitive in nature. If comments were already made by another speaker, please state agreement with the prior speaker and do not repeat what was already stated. I believe we have people on YouTube as well, and that is now live. So that moves us on to item number 1 for consent, the minutes from March 14th. Everybody read them? Any concerns? Any possible motions?
Motion to approve?
Elaine, motion to approve. Thank you, Elaine. We have a second?
I'll second.
Ryan will second. Thank you, Ryan. All in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. That moves us down to item number 1. Jenna, Senior Long Range Planner. We're going to discuss the bicycle and pedestrian system maps.
Hey, good afternoon. So I'll be presenting for public hearing number 1, a public hearing and possible motion regarding an amendment to the bicycle and pedestrian system plan map to provide a greenway connection between Termini Drive and Hume Olive Road. So to provide some context, we're looking at the area west of 540 and north of Old US 1 in the vicinity of the Apex Friendship Schools. And this proposed amendment is to add a proposed greenway between Termini Drive, shown here, and Hume Olive Road, shown here. So this greenway would extend the proposed greenway shown here with the dashed green. Along here is the proposed greenway, and then it would connect to proposed side path along the north side of Hume Olive Road. So this exhibit shows a zoomed in look at that proposed greenway and how it overlays with the proposed Friendship Village development, and just showing that the alignment aligns with the proposed Friendship Village master subdivision plan. And Friendship Village is planning to provide an easement throughout their section where the greenway is proposed, and they're planning to construct the section from Vitrina Way South. And yeah, that's also the Planning and Community Development Department staff recommend approval of the proposed amendment. And at their February 23rd meeting, the Parks and Rec Advisory Commission considered and unanimously recommended approval of this proposed amendment. Are there any questions on this item?
I like it.
I like it.
Awesome. I'll open up.
Thank you, Jenna. All right. Any comments from the board? Any questions? Do we have a possible motion? Public hearing, excuse me. Thank you, Diane. Do we have anybody in the crowd, in the public, wishes to speak, or do we have anyone that emailed in for this one? No emails? Okay. No comments from the public? All right, and I will bring it back to a board for a possible motion.
I'll make a motion to approve it as Jenna presented it.
Thank you, Mark. I have a second, first from Mark. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Keith will second. Thank you, Keith. We have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, on to item number 2. Jenna, you're going to talk to us again for another public hearing,
Yeah.
proposed amendment to bicycle pedestrian plan.
Yes, thank you. So public hearing number 2, public hearing and possible motion regarding an amendment to the bicycle and pedestrian system plan map in the vicinity of the proposed Huxley subdivision. So we're looking at the area east of the Tobacco Trail and Richardson Road and north of Olive Chapel Road. So here's the Reedy Branch Greenway, and the proposed amendment is to add a proposed greenway from the future Reedy Branch Greenway to the proposed Huxley subdivision. And similarly, this slide shows an overlay of the proposed Huxley master subdivision plan over with the proposed greenway on top, shown here with the dashed green. And they're planning to construct this greenway as well. And at their March 30th meeting, the Parks and Rec Advisory Commission considered this amendment and unanimously recommend approval, and planning staff recommend approval as well. Are there any questions about this proposed amendment?
I like it. No other comments or questions for Jenna? Any public comment? No? No public comment today? All right. Oh, I need a motion, please, for this one.
A motion to approve?
Keith will first.
I'll second it.
Mark second. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. Item number 3, once again, Jenna Schaus, bicycle and pedestrian system map updates.
So public hearing number 3, a public hearing and possible motion regarding amendments to the bicycle and pedestrian system plan map in the vicinity of future Felton Grove High School. So Felton Grove High School, or future Felton Grove High School, is shown here in yellow, and it's located west of Stevenson Road and east of Smith Road. And the proposed amendment, let me find my cursor, is to remove this section of proposed greenway, shown here with the X's, and to add and extend greenway through the future high school site and to connect to a proposed side path along an extension of Thriftwood Drive. And similarly, here's an exhibit that shows the greenway overlaid with the site plans, and Wake County Public Schools is planning to construct this greenway as part of their project. Are there any questions about this proposed amendment? Yeah.
I don't know if it's off topic, but is Thriftwood Drive, there's some discussion early on when that school came before us, earlier in 2021. Is that resolved? Is that going to be a connection made out, and does that greenway go out all the way to Stevenson Road? Do you know?
Yes. The greenway does not go all the way up to Stevenson Road, but Thriftwood will be one of the driveway accesses. Our hope is in the future to extend right of way to continue that greenway all the way through, which that's not been provided yet.
Cool. Thank you.
Side path, that
Any other questions? Thank you, Jenna.
Sure, thanks.
Were there any emailed comments on this one? No? Anyone in the public want to discuss this item? No. All right. And I will bring it back to the board for a possible motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve it as Jenna just presented it.
Thank you, Mark. I have a first. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ryan. I have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposing? Passes unanimously. All right, Jenna, item number 4. Public hearing and possible motion for thoroughfare collector streets.
Yes, so public hearing number 4, public hearing and possible motion regarding a proposed amendment to the thoroughfare and collector street plan map to shift the alignment of Pristine Water Drive at NC 55. So Pristine Water Drive is shown as the thoroughfare and collector street plan map as a future minor collector. It's shown here with the dashed pink, and it's located south of US 1 and Lufkin Road and intersects with East William Street at this location. So the proposed amendment is to shift the alignment of this roadway south away from the Colonial Pipeline easement. And this amendment was requested by the developer of the apartment section of the Aqualine Plan Unit Development. And planning staff support this recommended alignment shift on the plan. The purpose, or the amendment was requested, or excuse me, Colonial Pipeline indicated that the roadway cannot be constructed within the Colonial Pipeline easement, which is shown here in orange. So the proposal is to shift the alignment south away from that easement. This exhibit is a different orientation, so north is to the right, and here is NC 55, and here is Pristine Water Drive. And the Aqualine developers have secured support from Argos, which is the concrete plant located on the east side of East William Street. At this location, they've secured support from this property owner to construct the intersection of Pristine Water Drive at East William Street at this location. And this would allow for a full movement access at this location, at the intersection. Okay. Let me go back up here. So an extension of Pristine Water Drive to the east as a public road would occur in the future. There's currently no funded or programmed public project to extend Pristine Water Drive east between East William Street and Burma Drive. But a segment of Pristine Water Drive between Lufkin Road and Burma Drive is included in the town's 5-year capital improvement program, and it's currently slotted for fiscal year '24, but that is subject to reprioritization. The intersection of Pristine Water Drive at NC 55, right here, would be constructed as part of the Aqualine PUD, as well as an extension to the west. Planning staff recommend approval of the proposed amendment, and it's been reviewed by staff from Public Works and Transportation, Police, and Fire, and they support the amendment as well. Are there any questions about this proposed amendment to the plan?
Thank you, Jenna. Did we get any online comments on this one? No? Any questions in the audience from the public? Any comments? No? All right, and then I'll bring it back to the board for a possible motion.
Make a motion to approve?
Thank you, Keith.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mark. So first and a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposing? All right, that passes unanimously.
Jenna is 4 for 4.
Yes, she is. Yes, she is.
Baseball season has started.
All right, item number 5, we have Lauren coming in to tell us about rezoning case 21CZ26.
Yes, good afternoon. This is rezoning case 21 CZ26, Hume Olive Commercial, located at 0 and 7525 Hume Olive Road. The property is located in this general area of our ETJ. The subject properties are a total of 7.69 acres, located west of the skewed intersection of Hume Olive Road and Old US 1. Both properties are vacant and generally wooded. The properties are currently zoned rural residential, and to the north and west, rural residential, to the south, rural residential, and mixed office residential retail conditional zoning, and a smidge of tech flex conditional zoning, as well as to the east, we have plan unit development conditional zoning. The applicant is proposing to rezone the properties to neighborhood business conditional zoning. The 2045 land use map identifies the subject properties as high density and commercial services. The 2045 land use map also shows a neighborhood mixed use activity center located at this vicinity. As a reminder, a neighborhood mixed use activity center is for economic development potential estimated to be, but not limited to, 100,000 square feet of commercial and 1 to 2 mile trade area. The proposed rezoning to neighborhood business conditional zoning is consistent with that land use classification. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on September 30th, 2021, and a copy of the neighborhood report is in your packet. A full list of the proposed uses and zoning conditions can be found on page 2 of the staff report. A few uses proposed are daycare facility, restaurant general, medical or dental, office or clinic, office, business or professional, and convenience store gas sales. Besides the non-residential architectural conditions we typically see, I wanted to point out a few of the zoning conditions. Number 10, and I'll summarize this a little bit. At the time the development plans for this property are submitted, a 20-foot greenway easement shall be provided along the western boundary and north to connect the pedestrian improvement on Hume Olive Road in a location coordinated by the Parks and Recreation Department. And then the number 12, the development shall record a cross-access easement agreements between parcels identified as in this location as well as this location prior to site plan final plat. The Environmental Advisory Board held a pre-application meeting for this rezoning on August 19th, 2021. The zoning conditions suggested by the EAB are listed on page 3 of the staff report, along with the applicant's response to each condition and whether the applicant provided the conditions or not. Transportation planning did have concerns related to this proposed rezoning that I wanted to point out. The subject properties sit inside the 2 legs of the Y intersection of Hume Olive Road and Old US 1 highway, with approximately 900 feet of frontage along each roadway. There are 3 schools, as you can see, this one's under construction, within a half mile of the subject properties. The transportation plan identifies Hume Olive Road as a 3-lane thoroughfare with an 80-foot right-of-way, and Old US 1 highway as a 4-lane median divided thoroughfare with a 110-foot right-of-way. The bicycle and pedestrian system plan map includes a 10-foot side path on the south side of Hume Olive Road and future bike lanes along Old US 1 highway and future greenway along the western property boundary. Given the limited road frontage, provisions for a cross-access and connectivity are needed in order to promote and provide safe movements by limiting access on high traffic volume roads at poorly aligned intersections. In response, staff requested that the applicant provide the following zoning condition A single point of access shall be provided on each roadway. That zoning condition was not offered by the applicant. Therefore, staff is unable to support the rezoning without a condition limiting access in order to improve safety. So approval, and that was from the transportation folks. Approval of the rezoning is reasonable because the proposed neighborhood business conditional zoning district is generally consistent with the 2045 land use plan. The 2045 land use plan classifies the subject property as commercial services and high-density residential, which includes the neighborhood business conditional zoning. From a land use perspective, approval of the rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest because the proposed neighborhood business conditional zoning district will encourage compatible development of the property, increase the tax base, and provide the flexibility to accommodate the growth in population, economy, and infrastructure consistent with that contemplated by the 2045 land use map. It will also provide an opportunity for non-residential uses to serve the surrounding area while providing flexibility for future development with the surrounding properties. However, from a transportation perspective, the rezoning is not reasonable and in the public interest in that it does not meet the needs of the transportation network in this area by not limiting access on these high traffic volume roads at a poorly aligned intersection. So planning staff can recommend approval of the rezoning if the following zoning condition is offered. A single point of access shall be provided on each roadway. So I'm happy to answer questions as well as Russell for transportation, and I think the applicant's in the audience.
Thank you, Lauren. Any questions for Lauren? Does the applicant want to come up and speak?
Thank you, and good afternoon, Chair Skinner, Vice Chair Steele, and members of the Planning Board. I am Neil Ghosh, an attorney at the Morningstar Law Group, located at 700 West Main Street in Durham, and I'm representing the applicant for this rezoning. I want to thank Ms. Stoudenmeyer?
Yes, sir.
Close, for her presentation. As she mentioned, this rezoning is meant to facilitate a non-residential or commercial development in the Hume Olive Old US 1 corridor, east of the Friendship Campus and kind of south of where Bella Casa is. The 2045 land use map calls for high-density residential or commercial services in this area. With all the existing and approved and proposed residential in the area, our team felt that the most appropriate use for these parcels out of the two designations would be commercial services. Though this is not a bad site for high-density residential, I think the challenge in this region is not the amount of housing, but it's really the proximity of that housing to goods and services. You've already got the Friendship area, and there are some commercial uses nearby, notably Vicious Fishes, which is hard to say. Adding more commercial uses here will help achieve a meaningful commercial node, thereby helping to complete the neighborhood, fill it out, provide for a more complete neighborhood, which I think goes directly to the quality of life. At this time, we don't know specifically what businesses will go here. We've left a wide array of possible uses, but we've eliminated some as well. We also have offered commitments related to the appearance of the businesses. Now, where possible, we have included conditions related to the dedication of a greenway, which I think actually aligns with item 1 from today's agenda, that greenway, and also cross-access. I know the staff report mentions a request to limit vehicular access to no more than one point of access onto each of the adjacent rights of way, I should say. It's just not a zoning condition that we felt we could commit to at this time without knowing the types of businesses that are ultimately going to go here. Also, we don't know what the ultimate configuration of these parcels will be. And, there could be some TIA-related findings that come up at time of the development plan that may impact that. So it's not that we necessarily absolutely desire for there to be multiple access points onto either of these roads. It's just that we didn't feel that the zoning stage was the appropriate time to make that commitment, because there could be reasons for there to be additional points of access onto either road. And we didn't want to limit that at zoning. It's something that will be studied and looked at time of development plan. and we're open to that. But, other than that, I think that this project has satisfactorily addressed all of staff's concerns. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Let me know.
Any questions for Mr. Gooch? So you're not opposed to the change? You're open to it?
We are not opposed to there being only one point of access on either road. We think this is the wrong time to make that commitment because there could be information that comes up later which suggests that it'd be safer or better for there to be multiple points of access onto either of those roads. So that's why we're saying we don't want to commit to it now. But if that's what comes out, from any kind of studies that are done at time of development plan, sure, that's not a problem. But we didn't want to make that the case absolutely at the zoning stage. That's all.
So Lauren, does that change how we advance with this one, or no? Okay.
So I have a question for Lauren and or Russell. So Neil's saying this decision could be made later, but what authority would the town have and what capability would the town have to enforce a single point of entry if we don't do it tonight?
Very little. I would say this is absolutely the right time to discuss it based on the context of this location. You're looking at a zoning of 2 parcels with a fairly limited amount of frontage in close proximity to a major intersection obviously with concerns today. It'll continue to get busier in the future. And we've run into this issue in the past, even on planned unit developments, where in cases where it's not specific in terms of limiting access, you get certain uses coming in like gas stations or pharmacies or other things that try to stick in extra points of access really close to major intersections, and it causes a lot of headaches. There's a lot of back and forth with staff, and at the end of the day, it's very difficult to enforce limitations like that without zoning conditions. This won't go back to planning board, it won't go back to town council. I mean, this is the time when the boards hear it. So I want to make sure that, that planning board and town council are aware of these concerns now and decide what they're comfortable with. But
So Neil's offer to consider it later is not really enforceable. So from your opinion, we really need to make this decision tonight. Sounds
yeah,
like.
correct. I would recommend the condition now because we feel confident that both of these parcels can come together and get good full movement access, one on each roadway. The concern is later that if it's deferred to a future analysis, what's going to happen is an engineer to come in and say, well, we can put right in, right out, extra right in, right outs closer to the intersection, and it works okay and it's safe. And it's very difficult for staff to come back and say it's, for one, it's not safe, and 2, to completely deny that type of access on a state roadway.
And then the other question I had for you, Russell, is I really appreciate your expertise on this, is it looks like they've kind of gone halfway. It's really not too full, it's like a half, where they've got this, it's almost like a loop, around the triangle, where you can come into the gas station off of 1 and then come out on Hume Olive. Is there any modification? I'm on page 25. Yeah. So if it's the site plan, their kind of preliminary site plan. And so if there was this sort of not quite full access, but sort of a loop around the gas station itself, if that was, would that satisfy you? If there was some less than they have on this drawing, but something to let traffic come out of the gas station, only go to the light, or come around from the light and come into the gas station?
We would prefer not to have any sort of access in close proximity
Okay.
to the intersection,
Okay.
considering just it's not a great
just too
alignment.
close to the light.
It's not a great alignment to begin with. I mean, we'll certainly have this discussion at council as well, because one of the things that's come up with them in the past is just overall concerns with these type of intersections
Yeah.
where you have this kind of connection. So we're trying to be very cautious at this stage for anything that's coming in close to the intersection.
Right.
Russell, I have a question. Hume Olive and South Salem Street are both DOT roads.
Correct.
If the applicant was to come in with a minor site plan and were to seek a driveway permit, you guys as the town would have to sign off on the driveway before it goes to DOT for ultimate approval.
That's correct.
Would not they have the ultimate say as to whether or not it's safe? Like, I guess to put it another way, if it's a North Carolina Department of Transportation highway, wouldn't the jurisdictional determination of safety fall on the DOT, not on the town?
Well, the concern staff have is that we've had experience with approving PUDs and different land uses and looking at access. It's our police department that enforces, traffic safety in response to crashes. It's not NCDOT. So from their perspective, we're trying to limit the amount of access and make less good access points instead of more, subpar access points, so to speak, with islands that signs get hit, with right in, right out pork chops that drivers drive around and violate the left turn restriction. So those are the kind of things we're trying to prevent. And the term safety is rather difficult to define. Level of service capacity is a little bit easier to define than that. So a lot of times, things will go to DOT and we may not necessarily agree with them, but DOT will sort of throw up their hands and say, well, we don't have any regulations to try and prevent this. So at the end of the day, it's difficult in terms of enforcement.
I'm on page 25 like you are. I wish the applicant didn't actually provide this because we're talking just about a rezoning. And honestly, now I'm looking at details here, which I shouldn't. But the question I have is, and to Mr. Ghosh's point, if they don't have a user lined up, I'm looking at a gas station on the corner. What if it's not? What if they want a full movement at one point? Are they locking in to a use that they may not have fully vetted yet? So what if we wanted 2 full access movements? Could they even get that? I mean, has that been vetted with DOT yet? Or is this just, are we saying you need 1 and we don't even know if it's full access? Because I would much rather have 1 full access than 1 right in, right out. And do we know that?
Yes, so the intent of the condition is to get these two parcels to work together on 2 good full movement points of access. We feel confident they can get 2 good full movement points of access. It's just a matter of figuring out exactly where those need to be in relation to our regulations. Old US 1's a major thoroughfare, so typically we look for at least 800 feet of spacing. Hume Olive's minor thoroughfare, we look for at least 500 feet of spacing. Allowing additional access points typically means that corner user, whatever it is, gas station, pharmacy, those are the typical type users that want to go in on a corner. They try to seek access as close to the intersection as possible in working with their site plan. And again, those are typically problematic for us because you end up with islands and pork chops and things like that where drivers are constantly running over the signs, they're constantly violating the conditions, and they create safety issues that our police have to respond to.
Any other questions or comments for staff or the applicant?
I have a planning question. I was looking at some of the committed elements on the architectural, which now would be the time where you can enforce committed elements. Look, again, page 25, I'm looking at a layout. I wish I wasn't, but I am. So, if we're driving along, Hume Olive along, you see the school, there's neighborhoods. Are people going to be looking at the back end of a commercial building, and is that going to have the same architectural controls as the front of the building if the front is on the interior? So I guess, is there a way that we could assure that the town has a aesthetically pleasing back of house, so to speak, if it's facing the public right of way as you drive by on South Salem Street in Hume Olive?
Yeah. Do you want to? Different to Amanda, but yes.
Many of the architectural standards in Article 9 of the UDO relate to the facades that are visible from the public right-of-way. And so there should be, we understand your concern. There's been other developments at intersections like this where they're more internally facing, and we've ensured that there's adequate windows and, aesthetic standards to the building looks good from the roadway.
Any other questions for staff or the applicant?
Question. If this worked, it looks like one of the permitted uses would possibly be apartments. And if they did just build just strictly apartments in this area, what kind of density would they be subject to? And we're talking about putting a lot of people at an intersection that's already kind of tricky. That's really going to clog it up. Looks like that's the only residential use there is apartment. Everything else looks to be commercial use.
Okay, so, they do have accessory apartment listed as a permitted use, which would be upper story residential only. So, you know,
Secondary to the retail.
secondary to the retail, so it would be upper story, but they'd have to meet their parking requirements and everything else. It'd be hard to say what the density would be, given the demands of the site for the retail and the parking and circulation that's needed for that. But, you know, so don't really have a solid answer for you there.
Any other questions? Were there any online submissions for this one?
No
No.
public hearing comments for this one.
All right. Do we have any comments from the public? Sir? Step up. Have you already signed in?
Yes.
All right, please state your name and address for the record.
Gregory Lyon, address 603 Laurel Berry Court, Apex. Comments on this proposal is, in the pretty good presentation, bikes are going to be involved. Since COVID, bikes actually, usage increased 700%. And from old people with e-bikes, now they're everywhere, little kids. I just think that proposing this, but not having any type of mitigation plan for bikes that are hard to see, they can go everywhere that car can go, or they can go over lanes or curbs or whatever. Little kids are going everywhere. That should be thought of. And I understand his point of like, hey, we don't know what business is coming in, but it's a pretty good guise of saying, hey, we really don't know, just approve it. And then a car wash comes in, a motorcycle dealership comes in, or, you know, Carvana, because all their cars go up and up and up. So this, you know, I think it's just something to keep in mind, that the single point of entry on either parcels. I really liked all those questions that this council has thought of. And I just want to say that, yeah, the bicycles should be taken into account as even more hazardous because, well, just the study was done last year, that bicyclists, 52% are the ones at fault in accidents because they just don't follow the rules. So I just wanted to comment about that. It's something to take into account, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. Any other public comment? All right, we'll close the public comment section and bring it back to the board for a possible motion.
Can I make a comment for your motion?
Please.
So I'm in the 2 Mile trade area here. Most of the neighbors that I'm close to have been really waiting for more commercial development near Vicious Fishes, Piranha Joe, Cool Pools. And this is actually, I've asked several of them since I saw this on the agenda, and I said, are you okay with the gas station? They're like, yes, please. So I was surprised, because a lot of times people are like, no. Now, on the other hand, full disclosure, my neighbors don't live right next to there, but they are, you know, they're less than a mile away. Second, I'm a very avid biker. I bike right by this intersection 2 or 3 times a week. I drive by this intersection every day, multiple times a day. So hence all my detailed questions for you. Thank you, Russell. I am really concerned about safety at this intersection, period. It's dangerous right now. And I don't, you kind of made that comment, Russell, but I think most people missed it. This is a dangerous intersection already. It's misaligned with the triangle. There's people exiting Vicious Fishes that are not coming out at the light. They're coming out randomly. That I would like to ask that something be done there, but this will make that worse. So we need to really be, we, the planning board and the town council need to err on the side of safety, just like Mr. Lyons said. So I really want to see this developed. I really want to see a gas station, a coffee shop. We have a coffee shop, a donut shop. That would be my favorite. Some more commercial going on here. I'm really, and my neighbors are anxious for it in this area, and this is the commercial entity that we've been kind of waiting for. On the other hand, I want it to be safe, and I don't want to get hit going by it, you know, and I don't want to hit somebody driving by it. So I'm 100% in support of the planning staff's recommendation that we withhold approving it unless there's a condition added tonight, or we make a motion to approve it with hopefully between now and when the town council sees it, which is next week.
Next week.
that they have a week to get that added before they see town council. So I'm open to either of those, but I would oppose it if neither of those were pursued.
It's April 26th.
April 26th, okay.
Okay. So, about 10 days.
Okay.
With that being said, are you formulating a motion or?
I'm thinking, but I want to hear what you guys think.
I agree, the area needs it bad. The commercial part of it, I leave Apex, take my kids to school, and there's nothing gas-wise, water, you can't stop anywhere and get anything on the way to school and back. And the traffic is already stopped on US ones already in the mornings. But the commercial aspect would be good. It is needed, I agree. This is the perfect area for it. And again, it is a dangerous intersection, as y'all pointed out, so I'm gonna go with Mr. Steele.
So,
Anybody else want to add ideas before a motion comes out?
I don't disagree with staff that, it would plausibly would be safer with one, but something that caught my ear was that Mr. Dalton said that an applicant could come in and justify more than one. And as a professional engineer, there's got to be sound safety. I mean, as a professional engineer, you're looking out for the public safety of the population for which you're serving. So his comment was almost to say, yeah, but there's scrupulous professional engineers that may be getting something by, which I don't know that I can subscribe to. If there's a point in the future where this applicant has somebody on board with predictability, i.e. they have a zoning, therefore they can get funding for more commercial, maybe there's going to be something that could come out where a single access maybe is warranted, or maybe there's a corner user that absolutely has to have a right in, right out, and that's the way they're going to sign their LOI to the developer. However this deal structures, I hate to limit it, but on the same time, I also understand that, we're here to serve the people of Apex, and I would hope that a professional engineer would see it both ways, that could serve their client and also the people for which they're, supposed to be protecting. I think at this point, I'll back you guys. I think that they should try to find a way to be safe with the citizens of Apex. I just wish there was a way that we could kick the can till down the road, but zoning is the time when you can lock it in.
right.
So I'm going to try a motion, so help me out. So I move that the planning board recommend to the town council that they approve this rezoning if the developer adds the requested zoning condition, quote, "a single point of access shall be provided on each roadway," unquote, before they present to town council on April 26th. Did I cover everything?
You did? Diane, you have
I
comments?
actually noticed something about the way this condition's written that I think maybe you all might want to consider it to be a little different. I think it should say a maximum of a single point of access to be provided on each roadway, because what if there's none, you don't want any on Hume Olive or.
Right.
And what two?
Okay, I'm okay. All right. I'm okay with that amendment to my motion. Thank you.
So do we need to restate the motion before we go for a second?
I have it.
Okay. So we have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Tim. So we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
See what happens. I'm gonna have to go to town council.
Yeah, just might need to. All right, that brings us up to item 6. Shelley is going to talk to us about rezoning case 21CZ29, North Salem Station PUD.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Just to give you an idea of where we are, we are at the extreme northeastern corner of the town's jurisdiction, right where it snuggles up to Cary. I'm sure everybody's driven past this before. This is the unfinished office park that's at the intersection of North Salem Street and Laura Duncan, where North Salem turns into Old Apex.
Christmas tree.
The Christmas trees, yep.
That's how I,
Train tracks.
That's how everybody knows this area.
Back end, Mr. Costco, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah, yeah.
Pumpkin Christmas.
It consists of 9 parcels that measure about 10.4 acres. As you can see from the aerial, they're primarily vacant, or they're entirely vacant and primarily cleared, is what I mean to say. There are a few trees on there, but not very many of them. The adjacent properties are townhomes to the east and single-family residential and business to the west. To the south, on the other side of the train tracks, is also single-family. And then we have Laurel Park Elementary School on the eastern side of Laura Duncan. The property was previously rezoned in 1986 and has since been available for development with uses consistent to a shopping center or office park, and has never fully developed. All of the utilities and everything are in place, but nobody's been able to make it work. Parcels are currently zoned planned commercial here in the red section, and then B1, which is our neighborhood business, in kind of the pinky purpley color. In 2021, or I'm sorry, the proposed rezoning is to planned unit development conditional zoning. In 2021, the town council updated the land use map to add an apartment-only designation to certain areas that are designated high density already along existing and planned transit routes. And these 6 parcels or 7 parcels here were part of that. The black line that goes around them is actually the indication that that is an apartment-only designation. So townhomes, duplexes, et cetera, would not be permitted here. Since per Advance Apex, the minimum density for high-density residential is 14 units per acre, with a maximum to be determined at the time of rezoning. The proposed rezoning is consistent with the 2045 land use map designations in that it proposes 23 dwelling units per acre, or 239 apartments. And then it is still consistent, the uses listed on the south side are consistent with the blue striping, which is our office employment striping. These existing conditions just show you a larger scale of the parcels, in addition to some existing utility easements on site. The yellow is a Duke Electric easement. The blue are existing drainage easements. This kind of pale purplish color is an existing sewer easement. And then, of course, we have the right-of-way and the railroad. Since these parcels were created prior to the adoption of the UDO in 2000, they're governed by the pre-UDO zoning ordinance. We call this lovingly the old ordinance. This document was much less stringent than the UDO in many, many ways. Rezoning the lots or changing the lot lines requires compliance with the current UDO. As it stands, if this rezoning were not approved, and if the current UDO and the lot lines were not shifted during development, then they would actually be developed under that previous set of standards. Below is a list of general differences. So on your screen, the ones that we see that generally have the most impact is that there would be no stormwater control measures required for this property. There would be no RCA required. We would not be able to require any parks and rec fees or the greenway construction. Sidewalks would only be required on one side of the street. The current PUD requires that to be on both sides of any streets that they have frontage on. There would also be no parking maximums on here, so if someone came in with a commercial or non-residential use, we would not have any way of telling them they have too much parking. The architectural standards in the old ordinance are quite limited. And in this situation, with this PUD, we have very detailed architectural standards that we can hold them to. The current zoning entitles them to maximum of 5 stories. The PUD is proposing a maximum of 4-story apartments. And there would be no affordable housing or environmental zoning conditions associated because the existing rezonings are straight rezonings, they have no conditions on them. So that is just to give you an idea of what we are looking at as far as apples and oranges. Just to let you know, Wake County Public Schools received, we received a letter of impact from them for this rezoning, and it was quite surprising to staff. Wake County indicates that all the schools in the current assignment area for this development have sufficient capacity.
Whoa.
This is like a diamond.
First,
Yeah, I haven't heard this in a while.
no.
So, to give you an idea, they are proposing that all of the residential will be on these larger parcels on the north side of North Salem Street. And there will be one commercial parcel here on the west, to the west and south of North Salem Street. It's in the red. These green parcels that you see will be dedicated 100% as RCA. Now, they are clear at the moment, but the town does have a standard in the ordinance for planting cleared areas to meet the RCA standard, and it's pretty intensive planting. So they will be required to do that. That RCA will also be planted and dedicated for both pieces prior to the first, with the first plat for the subdivision, for the residential portion. There's a bunch of uses in your staff report. I'm not gonna read all of them to you. We have multifamily apartments and condominiums for your residential uses. And then as sampling of your non-residential includes medical or dental office or clinic, restaurant general, woodworking or cabinet making, retail sales, general and tailor shop. I feel like that gives a nice feel for the variety of options. There are also a variety of conditions included in your staff report. I'm gonna highlight a few of those. And again, I'm not gonna read the condition to you because some of it's fairly wordy. The applicant is proposing a maximum of 239 units, no more than 10% of which will be 3-bedroom apartments. The applicant's also offering that 5% of those units will be affordable housing and made available to occupants making a maximum of 70% of the area's AMI for the next 7 years after the first CO for the first residential building. And apartment buildings get a CO for the entire building, not for individual units within them. So that would be a pretty good chunk of them. The applicant's also willing to dedicate a public art easement in compliance with the public art map and donate $10,000 to Citizens for Apex Parks to be allocated towards a piece of art to install at this location. In addition, the residential parcels shall apply for National Green Building Standard certification at the bronze level, and will be designed and constructed to meet those standards. We also have a variety of architectural conditions if we get to page 4 of your staff report. Most of these are fairly consistent. You've seen them across the board on a variety of rezonings. There are a couple that I'm gonna highlight. Again, our cap of 10% for 3-bedroom units is listed here. Solar conduit will also be provided in all of the residential buildings to accommodate future installation of solar panels. And on the non-residential building, the exterior lighting shall not exceed a color temperature of 3,500 Kelvin and will meet all of the UDO requirements for full cutoff lights. All of your design controls are listed on page 5 of your staff report. Couple of things out of this. The residential buildings, as I stated earlier, will be 4 stories tall as maximum, and the non-residential will be 2 stories tall with a maximum of 10,000 square feet. If we move to the next page, RCA and buffers. I've already pointed out to you that lots 1 and 5 will be completely RCA. We also have buffers surrounding the perimeter of the property. For lots 2, 3, and 4, so this northern section here, the PUD is proposing a 10-foot type A buffer along the northern section here. There we go. If you can see my mouse.
Yep.
You might be able to tell that there's a little bit of an offset between this green buffer and this black property line, and that's because there's actually a 30-foot utility easement here on the north side of Lot 2, and a 20-foot drainage easement on the north side of Lot 3. So that will be 20 feet of drainage easement plus 10 feet of fully opaque plantings between the properties adjacent. Along the eastern buffer, so here, so along this side here, we have a 15-foot type A buffer. Again, there's a 20-foot drainage easement here, then the 15-foot type A buffer, and then as an attempt to accommodate some of the concerns of the adjacent neighborhood, they've also pushed the building setback further back than they would normally need to. Typically, a building setback off of a buffer is 10 feet. That's intended to give adequate space so that you don't damage tree roots, and you can actually still get your building in the ground. And so that you don't damage the branches and things like that. In this case, because this is a 4-story building that's going next to adjacent townhomes, and it's a little bit higher than those townhomes, the applicant has agreed to put a 60-foot building setback from the property line. So we have 20 plus 15 is 35, an additional 10 would be 45. That would be your normal setback. They've added an additional 15 onto that. And then along North Salem Street here, there's a 30-foot type A buffer being proposed. You may notice that this kind of slants through here, and that's because there is an existing Duke Electric overhead easement. So the PUD proposes that that electric easement be allowed to count towards the buffer as long as the plants that are selected are short enough so that they don't interfere with the electric lines. And we've seen that in other rezonings, and we're able to accommodate that with no problems. On this side, we have a 20-foot type A buffer along North Salem's road here, North Salem Street, and then no buffers along the perimeter here. And it does come right up adjacent to the RCA in that section. As far as parking goes, the development proposes a minimum of 1.3 spaces per residential unit and a maximum of 1.6 spaces per unit. This is a reduction from our standards in the UDO. This came about because of some conversations that the developers had with some town council members and their interest in preserving more green space if possible, more open space, and then also encouraging people to ride the future bus line. So that, not everybody necessarily will have a ton of cars. Staff is willing to support this because they have capped their 3-bedroom units at 10%, and because of the affordable housing condition that they're offering to work with us. If you look on page 7 of your staff report at the top, I provided you with a table that shows you what the PUD's proposal is and what the UDO's requirements are and what the difference between those two things are. So the minimum required for 1 and 2 bedrooms is typically 1.5 spaces per unit. And then for 3 bedrooms, it's 1.8 per unit. Believe it or not, this works beautifully across most of our apartments. Jenna Schaus, who was up here earlier when she was an intern with us, did a study that looked at all of the parking lots in our apartments in Apex and what the calculations were, what the parking ratios were per unit. And we don't hardly ever get complaints about too much or a lack of parking. And because parking accounts for a significant portion of disturbed space and impervious surface, meaning it's harder to clean the water from stormwater, the town has a good interest in minimizing that where we can without impacting services. So this PUD would provide 54 fewer spaces than our typical standard would if we looked at just the minimum. The UDO for maximum would provide 420, and the maximum for this would provide 383, so that's a reduction of 37 spaces. We looked at a variety of different options through there when we were working with the applicant, and we felt that this number was something that we could, as staff, support. The non-residential section will comply entirely with the UDO. There's nothing there to provide a change. In additional conversations with town council, the applicant was asked to provide their electric vehicle charging spaces based on the UDO requirement instead of on the reduced rate provided in the PUD. So the 5% parking spaces will be calculated based on what the UDO would require.
Good.
So this means that we will actually have more EV charging spaces on this site than we would otherwise. North Salem Station already has water, sewer, and electrical systems right there. It's infill. There's no need to run additional lines. We may have to there may be some upsizing of lines that might be determined at a later date. They meet at this point, they meet all of our master plan requirements, and the design will be finalized with the subdivision plan review. The applicant is proposing to meet the town's requirements for the 24-hour, 1 and 10-year storm events, and treatment will be provided for the first inch of runoff and provide the minimum 85% removal of suspended solids. Due to site constraints, the stormwater measures may be underground. It's a very tight site. 10 acres isn't a lot to get apartments in, but I've been assured by one of our water resources reviewers that underground systems function just as well as above ground systems when it comes to slowing the water down and removing all of the gunk that comes off of our parking lots and things like that. So they said that they have to meet very stringent standards and that they meet the same ones that the above ground systems do. Just to give you an idea of the apartment's architecture, these are not finalized renderings, but this is to give you an idea of what they're looking at and to let you look at a sampling of what the non-residential might look like. With regards to the transportation requirements, the Thoroughfare and Collector Street plan map designates North Salem Street as an existing 3-lane thoroughfare. The developer will dedicate any right-of-way or easements necessary to accommodate any of the improvements that I'm about to list for you. I've broken this up into 2 different sections, and I've broken it up a little differently than it's listed in my staff report because it flows a little better this way. Anything highlighted in red on this page is required as a part of the residential development. Anything highlighted in blue is required as a part of the commercial development. So there is already existing sidewalk along the western side of Laura Duncan and along the northern side of North Salem Street. It'll probably get banged up during construction, so it'll get replaced, but it's already there. Along this eastern side, our bike ped plan shows a 10-foot side path, and that will be installed by the developer with the residential section. They will all
Upgrade is what you're saying.
We will be getting something that we don't have right now. Yep. They'll also be required to build a greenway connection here that connects into the town of Cary's Greenway and Linville Ridge, so up in this general area. We'll also be getting sidewalks on both sides of Candoon where they have frontage, so they won't be building it over here, but that's because they don't own it.
Business park, yeah.
Right? And then with the development, they'll be building 2 bus stops. That this is a representative location, it's not finalized. But the bus stops, they plan to build sidewalk from here to the east, and they plan to finalize these two legs of the intersection. These two are already in, the northern and eastern ones, and they plan to install the western and southern ones. Now, CSX, DOT, and Cary all get to weigh in on these. So there is a caveat that as long as they agree to it and approve the designs, the developer will build it. But that is their intent at the moment. And this would provide us with a second set of connections and everything, and improve our pedestrian system significantly. In addition, the applicant has agreed that there will only be 2 access points allowed along Laura Duncan Road. This would be one lining up here with Camden, and another one here, as far from that intersection as we can get, for the western side of that. This was partially done as a request from some of the surrounding residents. They didn't want to see a lot. There's a lot of kids that walk from Linville Ridge South to get to the school, and having a lot of extra driveways along through there makes it more difficult for those kids to negotiate. But it's also a concern because in the future, we anticipate Laura Duncan to be grade separated from North Salem Street, going over the railroad, and allowing another driveway here, which just means that we have to knock out somebody's parking driveway. So one of the other things that the developers agreed to with this portion is that they will set back the buildings 50 feet south of Candoon along Laura Duncan. So here and here, the buildings will be set back 50 feet from the road. And that's to make sure that we don't have to knock down an apartment building when we go to build that, so that, people aren't even more annoyed with us. But they're also proposing 50 feet from North Salem Street as well, because there are likely to be road improvements needed for that part as well. In addition, a maximum of 3 points of access will be permitted on Candoon. So one on each side here, and then one over here on the western side. And then, it's off my sheet, but they are also committing to lengthening the eastbound left turn lane on Old Apex Road as it approaches Cary Parkway to the maximum extent possible. They're planning to do that by restriping the existing median. If DOT decides that they want to make them mill and redo, then they will not be required to do that. But as long as they're just allowed to restripe, they're committing to doing that.
The left turn lane onto Cary Parkway.
With the non-residential piece, they're proposing to connect the sidewalk along the south side here in the blue. And this is my very rough drawing on top of their drawing. So, but it will come from the bus stop and then move east to the edge of the property line. They're also committing to a stoplight warrant study at North Salem Street and Salem Church Road prior to site plan approval.
That'd be ideal.
And then we also have future plans for a roundabout in this location. So you might get one or the other.
Yeah.
And they're offering to dedicate a quarter of an acre, so this section here, for that future roundabout. And then in addition, they've committed to widening North Salem Street to provide a 2-way left turn lane between the driveway axis, so here, and the intersection here. The developer's traffic consultant also did a comparison for us that showed the maximum build out that would be allowed under the existing zoning and how much traffic that would generate compared to what this project generates. Now, their numbers are theoretically possible, but would be incredibly difficult to park. If they wanted to go underground though with their parking, they could do it. So the numbers are kind of on the high side, but this shows that what's available to them now is 5 times the amount of parking that they're anticipating their project to generate. If we were to say even cut this in half, then that would still be 2.5 times the amount of traffic that this project would generate. So we just wanted to make sure that everybody had that. And then the EAB met on August 19th last year and recommended 10 zoning conditions. Those are listed starting on page 9 of your staff report. The applicant included all of them except 2. One of those is to provide a retention pond that will serve a 25-year storm with maximum residual volume allowed for the pond surface. Now, because the site is so tight, we've already talked about how they're probably going to have to do underground detention. And because the EAB recommended a pond specifically and talked about residual volume, they can't meet this one. Now, if there's space available once they get to site plan, they're happy to put in a pond. It's generally less expensive than underground, but they just don't feel like they can commit to it at this point. That seems reasonable to staff. The second one that they were not able to commit to at this point was to add 6 trees internal to the parking lots for the parking lots here. I just realized that was repetitive. But again, because the site is so tight, they can't commit to the extra trees at this point. We don't have a layout that's been looked at. But they do plan to add additional trees where possible and appropriate as and if the site design allows. So, Parks and Rec reviewed this on February 23rd and recommended a fee in lieu with credit for the construction of the Greenway Trail. Planning staff is happy to recommend approval as proposed by the applicant. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I know the applicant is also here as well, though. Russell? We had traffic.
Thank you, Shelley. You've given us a lot to look at here. I know there was a lot of public comment,
Yes.
but what you've presented sounded very palatable. I mean, just the walking infrastructure, there's a school just over those train tracks that sounds like would benefit a lot from additional sidewalks, and grade separation is down the road, but real crosswalks for bikes and strollers, et cetera. I mean, that
There are definitely
sounds like
some things that we can
bonus.
get with this rezoning that we are not able to obtain with the existing
Right.
zoning. It's not to say we couldn't get them with a different rezoning, I have to be honest, but they are available in this one, and we have gotten a considerable number of concessions from this developer as we've worked through this. You're welcome.
Any questions for Shelley?
The condition about 6 additional trees, that's not to say they're not going to still meet VUA on the open.
No, that would be over and above the
Okay.
VUA requirements.
I mean, if parking is underground, the trees are a moot point anyway.
Right. I'm not sure that they will be putting all of their parking underground, but if you have a condition that requires 6 additional trees in your parking lot and all your parking's underground, that makes it kind of difficult to implement.
Does this, I didn't see it written, but is there structured parking that's proposed as part of this? Do we know or not?
I don't have that information at this time. The applicant might be able to answer that for you.
I have one question. Is there a crossing on Old Apex Road for the kids to walk to elementary school from?
There is.
There is? So that
There's a,
works with the light, I would assume? and-
it does at this point. So there's a crossing that goes east-west on the north side of North Salem Street. And then there's another crossing that goes north-south on that eastern side of the intersection.
But if with what's been offered here, we would end up with 4 crosswalks
We would have all
when
4
this is all
lights.
done, instead of the 2.
Assuming we get all the approvals we
Yeah,
need, yes.
got it. Oh, and I think you said it was in here that CSX has to weigh in on that, too.
Right, unfortunately, it's within a certain distance of CSX, and as we all know, they like to tell us what to do.
Yeah.
So, I don't see a particular issue with a crosswalk, but I have not been in conversations with CSX, so.
Thank you, Shelley. Any comments from the applicant?
Hello, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Michael Birch with Longleaf Law Partners. Here on behalf of the applicant, Castle Development Partners. A few introductions on the front end. With me today is Jess Achenbach and Jeff Shiflett with Castle Development Partners. We also have Anna Wadsworth and Drew Howe with the Wooten Company, and then Michael Karpinski, our traffic engineer with Ramey Kemp and Associates, in case the board has any questions on the technical side of things. So first, just want to thank staff for working with us throughout this process, not only planning staff, but transportation, but also staff worked with us on the public art condition and the affordable housing condition. We tried to take as much input from all the different departments and stakeholders as we could to fashion the conditions that are in front of y'all today. Just want to hit a few of the highlights because the staff report was incredibly thorough. First, I do want to just emphasize the consistency of this rezoning request with the land use plan, and note that the amendment, including the apartment-only aspect of the future land use map guidance, was adopted by council in February of 2021. And it was kind of initiated by the council as well to look at and identify opportunities to allow for higher density residential along these planned transit routes. And again, this was one of those 4 areas that were identified. And again, that policy guidance was adopted by council just over a year ago. And also just want to emphasize the number of kind of developer commitments to capitalize and encourage transit access, transit usage that is incorporated in this rezoning. That includes the 2 bus stops. It includes the off-site sidewalk improvements to those bus stops. It includes the multi-use path, the greenway path, as well as the 2 crosswalks at the intersection. Again, some of that is dependent on the railroad and DOT. But we didn't want to just try to take advantage of the policy guidance that's based on transit access without actually kind of making it real on the ground. Second, I want to focus on how the PUD addresses some of the concerns that were expressed by the public during our neighborhood meeting. I think our PUD document lists a number of items that were discussed during that meeting and kind of our responses. The staff report identifies those as well. I just want to hit kind of 4 at a high level: school capacity, stormwater, traffic, and transitions. On the school capacity front, you heard that Wake County Public Schools has provided a letter stating that there is sufficient capacity at the schools for this project. We also limited the number of 3-bedroom units to no more than 10%. So again, that in a lot of ways limits the number of units that could and typically do accommodate school-aged children. Stormwater, as you heard, site is currently vacant, actually has been cleared for quite a long time. You also heard that if developed under the current zoning, that no stormwater management would be required. So with this rezoning and development pursuant to this rezoning, this project will be providing both stormwater detention and treatment consistent with the town standards. On traffic, TIA was performed as part of this rezoning. It identifies and notes that the intersections will continue to operate at acceptable levels of service. The applicant agreed to all 10 conditions related to transportation improvements requested by town staff. And as staff highlighted, the current zoning permits a significant amount of trips over and above what we are requesting as part of this rezoning. So development under current zoning could generate again, significant more trips than we are requesting as part of this rezoning. And that would be without a lot of the improvements that we are agreeing to as part of this case. Last we've agreed to increase building setbacks along the northern and eastern property lines. As discussed, those are where we are adjacent to residential. And also note that there is, one, we'll be adding vegetation as part of our type A buffers. And then there is existing vegetation kind of off-site to our east and our north between this project and the townhomes to our east and the single-family to our north. Of course, we've also limited uses on this site that is allowed for a shopping center, essentially office and retail uses, limited down to residential and some non-residential. And we've also limited the hours of trash service to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday to limit the disturbance of that type of service that can happen. Finally, want to emphasize kind of the public benefits of this rezoning. Again, the affordable housing component. We worked with affordable housing staff. They proposed the condition that we have agreed to that's in front of you, as well as the condition for public art. That's providing an easement for the installation of that public art, as well as a donation to the Citizens for Apex Parks, $10,000 to go towards a public art project. On the environmental side, you heard about our 5% EV charging stations, the installation of the solar PV system on the community clubhouse, going ahead and fitting all of the residential buildings for solar conduits, so potential for in the future that those could be powered by solar as well. And of course, the design and construction to the National Green Building Standards, the bronze level. Finally, on the transportation improvements, again, we've highlighted those a couple of times: the crosswalks, the bus stops, the sidewalks, including those that are off-site, plus the Greenway connection and the wider path. And I also want to note, in response to some of the concerns that we heard during the neighborhood meeting, that we have committed to ensuring a paved connection kind of through our site during construction down to kind of the intersection in the school, so to kind of maintain a safe pedestrian passage from the residential through our site during construction, to facilitate safe walking to schools. So I wanted to highlight that as well. Again, we have tried, applicants tried very hard to address comments from both town stakeholders, community stakeholders, and again, we think this is consistent with the land use plan and provides a number of public benefits over and above, what would be required today. But even so, just try to go even further with that. So we appreciate your consideration, and again, our team is here for any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Birch. Any questions for the applicant?
All right. Thank you.
Now the public comment. If you've already signed in, one at a time, please come up. Remember, we have a 3-minute time limit. State your name and address, sir.
John Herring, 221 Lost Tree Lane in Cary. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I appreciate Shelley for taking a lot of my questions and being very patient with me as I asked her a lot of questions about the project. I took the liberty of putting a little handout that I had at your locations there. If it's inappropriate, I apologize if it was inappropriate to put it there. Shelley gave a very nice presentation. My primary concern is the vetting of the traffic pattern for this area. And if I could use this, maybe it's not the best way.
Would you like this or the aerial?
No, this one will work. She mentioned that there's an elevated roadway that's going to continue Laura Duncan across the railroad tracks to the other side of the railroad tracks. And that's a future consideration. At that point in time, the traffic pattern for those coming across the railroad tracks from the bottom here is going to, now that traffic at that light would typically turn right or left for the majority of the traffic. Now it's going to come down on to Laura Duncan, And all that traffic is going to now come on to Camden, come around and come to that intersection for right and left turns onto North Salem Street. In addition, now you've got traffic that's going to continue on from Laura Duncan to Cary Parkway, which currently doesn't have a light at that intersection. Traffic does back up on Cary Parkway from the existing light at what's called Old Apex there, back to that intersection, which is now going to inhibit right and left-hand turns onto Cary Parkway. And additionally, as I mentioned, you're going to have now right and left-hand turning traffic at Candoon there at that intersection. Plus, you're going to have traffic on North Salem that's going to want to get onto Laura Duncan. That's now going to be going onto that Candoon slight roadway, which is essentially a residential roadway. It's not intended for the volume of traffic that it's now going to have with the insertion of a roundabout. Now it makes it problematic to put a stoplight there at Candoon and North Salem to help manage that traffic. And so they did a traffic pattern which I think was probably based upon current conditions, but I don't think it fully vetted out all the conditions that may occur as you get the elevated roadway in place, as you get the roundabout in place. And so I'm just asking the council to maybe pursue and investigate that to a greater degree. One other last comment, complexes of this size and height are typically, the nearby ones are over by the Costco location and in through there. Those are 3 and 4 story, but there's an elevation change on the 4-story one, so it doesn't look like it's a full 4 stories. You've got a road height difference that makes it more look like a 3-story. I think a 4-story at this place makes this look like an apartment island and not an apartment that works with the neighborhood of primarily single-family homes and 1- and 2-story small commercial buildings that are there. So again, that's just another consideration. And those apartments over by Costco have a density of around 15 to 17 units per acre. This one's being proposed at 23. So
Thank you.
thank you for your time.
It's me again, Gregory Lyon, 603 Laurel at Berry Courts. Here in Apex, I live in Ellington Place, which is one of the neighborhoods just down below, right in here. And good job on the presentation, by the way. That was awesome. Initially, I've talked to all my neighbors and everything else. We thought it was just going to be straight out apartments. And you know, as Mark Twain said, there's nothing like a neighborhood that says apartments on it, because there's no community in apartments. Even, I mean, with COVID, no one talks to anyone. That's just how it goes. But everyone was really stoked on the idea of mixed use. We go in there, we have cool mixed use, we go across the street, donut shop, bakery, bike shop, childcare, hair salon, cafe, restaurant, spa, another donut shop. That proposal, when I talked to my neighbors, they're actually like, you know what, that's pretty cool. We knew something was gonna come there. No one's naive saying it's going to be flat and empty. We knew something's going to come up there. But just straight old apartments, everyone's against it. The mixed use, to try to blend the two communities, about 9 out of 10 people I talked to are like, that's a fantastic idea. I do have questions on the traffic. I got photos I could email to you, but currently right now during rush hour, there's traffic backed all the way from Laura Duncan to South Cary Parkway. And there's also, same time, traffic back from Laura Duncan all the way down to North Salem Street, about right where the intersection goes. And then during school time, after school, traffic goes all the way from Laura Duncan all the way down maybe about halfway until the park. And it blocks off all the traffic to get into these neighborhoods. So already that's a pretty big problem that I have to deal with. When school starts, they have the police officers directing traffic. I'm sure that costs money. It'll be even worse. But on the schools, I have a 4, 6, 7-year-old, but they can't get into Laura Park. So yes, The school district can accept it, but the school right across the street, it's awful. So I'm sure Laurel, other schools can accept these children. And then, last thing, if it goes through, we'd love to see a sidewalk connecting, right here. So all these neighbors could, because there's no sidewalk right here, could walk along here and go down to these cool shops. So yeah, it really comes down to the traffic. They pretty much met all the questions I had, but once again, I know I probably have about 30 seconds left. I think the red herring is the whole bus line. If you can afford $3,000 a month apartment, you can afford a car. If you can afford an EV car, then you probably make pretty good money. So 12 people to ride buses, I think that's just a red herring argument just to say, oh, we're complying with it. Another question I have, I found this map with DOT, is they have a roundabout going in right there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Have you signed in yet? Have you signed in?
Yes, I have.
Okay, great. Your name and address, please.
Hi, my name's Jill Fairberry. My address is 233 Lost Tree Lane, and I am completely against this development. I do not find it to be a public benefit. I find it to be a benefit towards this developer to already use land that has been cleared when it was changed. I live in the street right across. My backyard backs right up to this, and was not made aware that this was going to be turned into apartments. I did not think it was the right fit for the community. This is a single-family home community, a very quiet neighborhood, and does not need apartments to be built for the next several months. We have already touched on traffic, so I won't be redundant on that. My other biggest concern is 4 stories. That is too much. All the houses in the neighborhood are 2 stories. Why are we allowing a 4-story building to come in and block all of our views, ruin all of our natural sunlight and everything? It's going to look like a monstrosity when you go down this road. That is not okay to the people that have invested in this community. And I firmly ask that you oppose this as well as I do and deny this request to build this apartment building. Much more assessment needs to be done. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Krish, and I live right behind the circle. That is the Trace community. I have been living in the community for the last 15 years. And I literally escaped a million times from the accident in that the circle thing. Okay, and we complained, as you know, our HOA took this matter to Department of Transportation, but they did not do anything. Okay, literally, I live there. I just come out of the community every morning, every evening, every afternoon, every night for the last 15 years. I tell you, I escaped a million times the accident in that junction. Okay, moreover, that is one concern. Another concern is you just see that the triangular lot. The triangular lot, that's where it forks. So North Salem Street and here the North Salem Street and the Salem Church Street. That is my lot. Okay, I put in my savings, in that to build a dream home maybe down the line. Okay, but I don't want the town of Apex to just grab my land for the road expansion if they build the apartment and the traffic is the increasing. Okay, so I want just to protect my investment. I just want to make sure that it is not going against. Okay, so the people who are already living there or the investment that people have made there. Okay, so that is my question. That the triangular lot is all my savings. Okay, but if there is a traffic congestion, if there is a traffic problem, and if I don't want the town of Apex to come after me to just grab my land because it is 0.7 acre of land. Already I gave 0.11 acre for the utility easement. Already 0.11 acre of my land is in utility easement. I don't want another the portion of my land to go for the public usage. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And the main concern is only the traffic.
Thank you.
Hi there. Brian Fanny, I live at 215 Lost Tree Lane. And I want to thank Ms. Mayo for working with the community and hearing our concerns. I think our overall opinion is that we just don't believe the apartments are appropriate for the area. There really aren't any apartments in the general vicinity. The closest is really Costco, and that's a more metropolitan, busier area. As folks have stated, the infrastructure, I think, is especially tricky at this site with the railroad tracks, with that triangular intersection. It seems as though Old Apex is going to become much busier with time, and even putting something like a traffic circle on the main thoroughfare to get to Durham, I think could be a problem in time. As folks have said, crossing over the train tracks on Laura Duncan, that does get backed up in the evenings currently. And we don't think the apartments will help. I think we all understand the need for housing, but I would just recommend going with a lower density rezoning. I think that's more appropriate for the community and does give some benefit in terms of housing. I do appreciate that the parking ratio is a little bit lower and provides more green space. If this is approved, I think that's a good change. But I would just state that I just think this is too dense and too much for an area that's really surrounded by a residential community. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Reed at 225 Lost Tree Lane. Our property backs up to the proposed connection to the Greenway. It also backs up to the drainage easement there. The one concern we have is our kids walk to school on the I guess it's the left side if you look at Laura Duncan. Right now, I don't know if the traffic study has indicated anything, but with the increased traffic, as it stands right now, without the increased traffic, you're adding 350, 400 cars, give or take. Right now, a lot of the vehicles are using Laura Duncan. Between Cary Parkway and Old Apex. They're just shooting through there. There's unmarked, the road's not marked. What is proposed by the developer or even by the town? Is this a town of Cary problem? Because now it's past, once you get past Linville Ridge, which is the neighborhood we live in, now you've got that increased traffic downstream. So we're all concerned about the property here and the zoning, but what are the effects downstream into the town of Cary where we live and our kids still walk to school down Laura Duncan? So that's the main concern we have. And also the proposed bikeway. Is there any leniency to also add a sidewalk to the parkway? Because our kids walk down, again, I don't know if you can see the screen or my mouse here, but they're walking down this side of Laura Duncan, and then we have to cross the street at some point to get to the crosswalk. And they're going to have to use this bike path. Otherwise, they're going to have to navigate through several entryways, then cross a busy intersection, and then cross it again to get to the school. So we'd like to see a sidewalk also put in to accompany the bike path, or if that's already in, I apologize. I don't want to bring it up now. So those are my two concerns, and thank you.
Thank you.
Just real quick to answer your question, sir. The side path is actually a 10-foot wide asphalt section that is intended to be used for both bicycles and pedestrians. Okay. So, just in case someone else has that question.
Thank you, Shelley.
Good evening. My name is Linda Bailey. I live at 617 Sweet Laurel Lane in Ellington Place. Lived in the Cary Apex area for 30 years. I've attended numerous of these meetings. I've seen developers come through with these projects numerous times. I've seen the little guy get shot down numerous times. I'm totally against this project, and I urge you to please reconsider this. This intersection is an absolute nightmare. I was one of the first residents to move in here. I attended the meeting when Costco came through. Costco comes through, the apartments come through. I saw a child get hit, Laurel Park Elementary. I see people fly through this intersection, and this is without 240 units coming through. I'm sorry, you guys don't have a crystal ball. I can guarantee you, not everybody that moves in there is going to use public transportation. You're talking about hundreds of more cars coming through this intersection. It's already backed up behind my house all the way to the park. Thank God you opened up the second entrance to Ellington Place so we can at least try to get out back there just to get on to Laura Duncan, to wait 5 minutes to be able to turn onto Cary Parkway. And this doesn't include the other poor people that are going to be, you know, this monstrosity is going to be behind their house. This is way too many units, way too many cars. Please do not let these developers dazzle the money in front of your eyes one more time. Please take into consideration the people of Apex this time. I beg of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello everybody, I'm Harsha Deshpande and I live at 2104 Royal Berry Court, Cary. It's just right across the railway station here, just a little south of Laurel Park Elementary School, Laurel Park neighborhood. So I drop my kids to Kids Arcades on Southwest Cary Parkway every morning, and I pick them up in the evening. I usually take, the Laura Duncan Road to go to Southwest Cary Parkway, and it is that left turn to Southwest Cary Parkway, it is extremely dangerous in the morning. I have seen a couple of accidents in the past 6 months. If I take the old Apex Road in the morning, it is backed up. It's very hard for me to make left turn there. It takes me about 5 minutes. I have lived in places like this. I'm actually new to the state. I've moved here from Hillsborough, New Jersey. That's central Jersey. I've lived in places like this where apartments were built next to single family homes, very close. It does not go well. On paper, all these remediation plans, they look good, but in reality, they do not work. It becomes extremely dangerous. This intersection, it is terrible in the morning. I'm against this plan, and I request you all to consider this strictly. I just did not move here to see this place become Jersey. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
I can't tell how many more folks are for this particular one, but we're starting to hear a lot of repeat comments, so I don't know if you want to ask who else was wanting to speak.
Do we have anybody else wanting to talk on this particular zoning? CZ 21 and CZ 29?
Did you want to say something different than that's been said already?
We already talked about parking, and traffic and sidewalks.
Allison Faney, 215 Lost Tree Lane. And I understand the people behind me who want to say something about this because they live in the neighborhood that I do, and they see the beauty of it, and they respect it, and they love their investment, and they love their home. So I don't want to repeat all of the things that everyone else is going to say, and I want them to speak for themselves. But from a personal experience, when I first saw my home, before we ever bought it, when we were first looking at it, I pictured what would happen in the next 10, 15, 20 years of living there. I pictured starting a family with my husband. I pictured Christmases and having all of my family come to this home that we were so lucky and so blessed to be able to get. And this construction is the first time that I don't know that will be a reality for me. I don't know how safe and protected I can feel, or how protected I could make it for my child, my future child, and know that they would be in danger trying to get to school if they could even get into that school. And I just hate what that is doing
to all of the families that already have kids and that have already made this investment and that already love being there. I think that development is great. I think we need more housing in this area. I really do believe that. But we don't need over 200 units and towering in a place where it's already dangerous and congested as it is. That's it.
Thank you. Two more.
Hi, my name is Lois McGee, and I live at 237 Lost Tree Lane. And I sent a video on Friday. We had that terrific storm, and in 20 minutes, it was like we lived in Asheville on my road. You could hear the waterfalls. If you've listened to the video, turn the volume up, it sounds like you got Niagara Falls in the back of the yard. And we got 3 streams that come down, and one is coming down from the Dotson Lane subdivision that Apex put in, and then, Cary has their structures that they've built, and the water's coming down. And I live 3 houses in from the end road, and the gentleman that lives at the very end, if you looked at the video, I have water coming up halfway to his yard, and the water has actually come up to his structure. So I don't know what's going to happen to our lands if you build this property. And I know you say you can build a retention pond, but apparently, at least I didn't live there at the time, 7 years ago, when Dotson Lane was built, some neighbor told me they had a retention pond and they filled it. I had 2 people come to our house today, and I guess from the planning department or stormwater department, said that they do have a retention pond. My neighbor said she has never seen it, so I don't really know. And before that neighborhood went in, we had a dry creek bed. Maybe when we bought our house, the creek was probably 2.5, 3 feet. Now I got a gorge in the bottom. It's not my property. It's Corps of Engineers. It's owned by the HOA. And it's probably 4.5 to 5 feet. Tree roots coming out everywhere. Big, huge trees that are sitting on the edges of this gorge. And I just can't see what's going to happen to our property. Can we be guaranteed that you have this built and the retention ponds don't work? Water keeps flushing down from there, from the neighborhood over, I'd say to the right. My poor neighbor has like 5 streams coming down. Somebody built a pool in the neighborhood across the way. He said there's now water flowing down from the person who built the pool into his area. His area is a swamp at the end of the road where the greenway is supposed to continue on with the sewer lines, and he has swamps on the side of his house. Now, is somebody going to take care of us if this happens and the water comes down? And yeah, I might be happy because I might have a lake in my backyard, but the 2 people down below me are probably going to lose their house. So that's all I wanted to say. I'm not used to public speaking. This is, but I wish you'd really reconsider, because besides all the good arguments of the traffic, if you've ever driven at that time, you just can't believe that this is even considered. And then the water retention, I just don't know how it's going to handle it. But thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Bruce Heyer, 205 Smokemont. I agree with everything that's been said. My concern is mainly density versus the issues that are already there. You have traffic and safety issues. Our daughter had the car she was in totaled with the traffic issues here. You've got geographic issues with that lump with the train tracks. And now you're talking about basically tripling the number of units there on Laura Duncan. So you're going to take everything here and make it 3 times worse. You also have people parking along Laura Duncan, and this is particularly during the school hour peaks. That's really my concern, because you have people parking on Laura Duncan and Camden so they can walk their kids across. What's going to happen when you triple the number of people in the area? So otherwise, I support everything else that's been said. Thanks.
Thank you. I think that concludes. You are our last speaker, sir.
Okay. Well, my name is Matthew Turgrath. I live at 1046 Monmouth Loop. The back of my house backs up directly to this development, and I'm not against it. I work for a developer, actually, so I'm pro-development, and I wouldn't care seeing homes or businesses or anything going back there, but adding 240 apartment units in there, just for traffic purposes alone, just seems like a lot. I know we've all mentioned this, but I wanted to tell you from my experience, I mean, like I said, I see it from the back of my house. So, upstairs, I can see through my back windows at even carpool time. You see the cars are all lined up all along Laura Duncan in both directions. You see it, along with, so many kids that walk there. But I also want to emphasize the height of the buildings, 4 stories, when even the office building nearby isn't 4 stories. Nothing around it is 4 stories. And my community, we actually sit below the ground level of that apartment complex. So basically my second story is level with that ground level right there. So everything is going to just tower over everything around it. Not my community alone, but the others surrounding. So just would like for you guys to consider that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes our public hearing portion. We'll bring it back to the board for possible discussion and/or motions.
One quick thing, I forgot to tell y'all that we received a variety of emails, as I'm sure that you remember. This is the list of people who emailed.
Thank you. Any comments from the board?
Well, I made 6 pages of notes. And having sat where you all are sitting and having fought things in front of this board myself, I really feel for you. I can feel the emotion. I know how scary it can be, Lois, if you're not used to it. And we do appreciate your coming and sharing with us honestly and being vulnerable and just getting up in front of your peers and telling us how you feel. I've got 6 or 7 things I want to say, but I'm going to give my peers time to, so I'm just going to pick one. The current zoning that's there, if you were paying attention, I know you probably weren't because you were thinking about what you were going to say, but if you're paying attention to Shelley's 30-minute presentation, the current zoning there is really bad for you guys, really bad. If the concerns that you brought up to us would be worse if it was developed today under the current zoning. 5-story buildings, right? 2.5 to 5 times more traffic, et cetera. So just consider that tonight, that this development will make it, you don't have to like it, but it will be better than what it could be. And there could be a Walmart too, or a mini Walmart there. So I don't know if that's what you want. So I'm going to save my other 6 comments and turn it over to my peers.
I had a technical question about the RCA. It looks like part of that RCA for the commercial side is off-site. I was wondering how that, if they're not adjacent, the UDO, I assume, is allowing that to have off-site RCA?
Well, because all of this is coming together as one rezoning and because they are across the street from each other, instead of say, if this piece was
Across town.
way the far away, we would consider that off-site RCA. Instead, this is all part of the same thing. It's right across the street from each other, so we consider that to be on-site RCA.
Even though it's separated, okay.
Even though it's separated by the road. We regularly, when we're working on the development of a subdivision, have roads go through that one side of it is RCA and one side of it's the homes. So in this case, what you're seeing is actually a little bit more than you normally see from a rezoning because the roads are already there. And normally what you see is kind of just a blob. And you know that there are going to be places where roads are going to go because we have those lovely colored arrows everywhere. But you're not able to tell that there's actually going to be a road separating the RCA in some areas from the rest of the development. So in this case, you're actually, to some degree, getting more information than you typically get. But we do normally consider it to be on-site RCA if it's only separated by a road and is kind of directly across from, and is considered part of the same development. And in this case, because it's being rezoned together, that's what we would consider.
Now, is that RCA like deeded to the town, or how is that gonna work as far as guaranteeing that, like, say, lot 5 in that picture there is not turned into more commercial later on down the road?
That's a great
As
question.
As a rezoning, and, you know, it would look fine if you had parking lots sharing with lot 6, you know, on either side of that roundabout, potentially. I guess Russell could tell us whether or not you could have access in and out of lots 5 and 6 on either side of the roundabout, but, you know, what is to guarantee that, you know, this project, could it stand on its own 2 feet if it does not have the RCA, where the lion's share of what we're talking about is the apartment area? But then again, if you rezone that later on down the road, this would have never stood anyways. So that's my concern, is what is the guarantee for the future that this could even be a possibility to, you know, stay as RCA?
So it's twofold, and it's a great question. The first one is that zoning conditions stay with the land regardless of who owns it. The land could be dedicated to the town, but generally speaking, the ownership is maintained by the Property Owners Association or by the people who own the development. The second is that we actually require them to record a plat, which, for those people in the audience who aren't familiar with a plat, it is essentially a map that has a lot of labels and notes on it that gets recorded with Wake County Register of Deeds and lists all kinds of stuff on there. But one thing in particular it lists is that it's recorded as resource conservation area. And in our ordinance, if it's recorded as resource conservation area, you can't come back in and buy it and develop it. So unless there was a major change to the town's development ordinance, which I do not foresee, this would have both of those protections moving forward.
It would anyway, because once it's approved, the zoning ordinance is its own law for
Right.
this property. So even if the UDO changed, it wouldn't change what's
That's a good
here.
point.
We'd have to go through another rezoning process.
So it would have to come back to the board and have to go through a full explanation of everything again. That's a good point. Thank you, Diane.
I have a question for probably you, Ms. Mayo, in planning, but also with Russell in transportation. And this is kind of more of a whose theory wins out, the planner or the transportation engineer. I mean, I think most people in the audience here would probably vehemently declare that traffic is an issue at this intersection. I think everybody that came up, that was the number one thing that came out of their mouth. Now, is it Apex's position from a transportation side that we want to get more vehicles through this intersection quickly, or do we want to slow people down and make it safe for the pedestrian folks that are already there and for which more may be coming? Is it better to slow people down and not worry about throughput, or do we want more cars, grade separated, and make everybody happy because cars are zipping through there at a high velocity and a high volume?
I'm not going to speak for Russell. I'm going to say that at least for planning, we would prefer to see some happy medium that we can reach. That's, you know, you design these things, so you're aware that that is not always easy to obtain. But we're trying to accomplish providing minimally impacted systems while at the same time improving pedestrian safety and bicycle safety. Does that sound reasonable, Russell? Yes, please.
You know, we looked at this area as part of the Southwest Area Study, and this was one of the locations where we considered what a grade separated interchange would look like here. And what looks like would be the long-term solution if and when funding is obtained is actually taking Laura Duncan underneath the railroad, building a bridge for the railroad itself. And in that case, you might have the opportunity then to actually lower Salem Street as needed to still have an at-grade intersection. So in other words, this intersection would still be there in the current location, it would just be lower. You know, I heard a lot of concerns about how Candoon might be used as part of the interchange, and that's not currently the vision for that. Now, saying that, you know, no one's gone through a full analysis and interchange design. There's not funding available for it, but that's just what we would envision for this location. We did the building setbacks there
at Laura Duncan, because obviously if you're going under, you're having to lower Laura Duncan on the other side of the railroad tracks as well to bring everything down. The thought is not to go over at this location. And what Shelley was saying, our transportation plan doesn't show 4-lane divided on North Salem Street or Old Apex Road at this location. It's a constrained area. You're up against the railroad tracks, so all your widening would be going to the other side. That's certainly a conversation we could have in the future to determine how much additional widening may or may not be needed. It's not something we've recommended for this project. It is a congested intersection. Pre-COVID, I drove through it every single day on the way to and from work. I don't drive through it as much now, with a little bit of work from home, but I do visit it very often. I've been through it twice today. It's a very interesting location. There are times when it's extremely busy and it's backed up. There's other times I go out there and it's like a ghost town. And that's even at times when I think there would be a fair amount of traffic out there. So there's a lot of traffic dynamics out there that result from the school, commuter patterns. Post-COVID, commuter patterns have changed, where some days are much busier than others. So what we've done is we've recommended what we think are reasonable, mitigation strategies for this project, knowing it's going to continue to be congested. As Shelley pointed out, we've got 2 crosswalks that we would intend to be constructed with the sidewalk connections to get people across. There's currently 2 crosswalks today, but we think this is a better solution overall for pedestrians. The town completed a very significant roadway remarking project. If you go down there on Laura Duncan across from the school, it works a lot better than it used to. It's striped a lot better. We've made use of those lanes. I do like the fact that it's not a 4-lane roadway out there. We've got a rapid flash beacon for the crosswalk that only has to cross 1 lane in each direction. I think that's a benefit. So certainly there is merit to saying that, in locations like this, congestion is not always a bad thing. We're not trying to add more congestion, but at the same time realizing that this property is zoned for commercial. We, as staff, look at it as something eventually is going to want to go here, and what is the best solution in terms of traffic and everything else for this area. And this is in our opinion a reasonable solution, a good solution for this location.
Since you guys are both up there, can I ask another question? I think you hit on it. It was going to be my next question to Shelley, was the 50-foot building setback off of Laura Duncan on both Lot 4 and Lot 3. Seemingly those are that's your predominant corridor, but you just said that you guys wanted to pull the building setback off to allow for future flexibility to grade separate. In your professional opinion, what is the likelihood that CSX and that would ever get funded?
It's probably, and Cary Parkway is also something in the future that they're looking to grade separate. We're talking about long-term projects, so probably not in the next 10 years, much more likely in the next 20 years.
I'm thinking about where we can see something like this, where you would have a multifamily, high-end residential townhomes, a school nearby. The only thing that comes to mind would probably be like Briar Creek Village Center, where you have Ulm and Bruckhouse Street, you have the elementary school, you have the Briar Creek residences across Briar Creek Parkway. It feels very similar to what this proposal would be. That seemingly works well because you have building massing that kind of has that imposition that slows people down. They're not going through there so fast down Bruckus Road. There's more of a T&D, a urban feel to it. Slows people down. I think that if you create that wide corridor coming up through Laura Duncan, it's going to be a raceway.
Yeah,
it already is, sounds like.
Yeah, and Town of Cary staff have been working with us on Laura Duncan, and there was an agreement in the works, and I don't recall the status of the Alphan planning staff may know, but it was to actually restripe Laura Duncan Road with a WL center line and offset edge lines for bike lanes. And also as part of that project was an extension of sidewalk, or extension of the multi-use path in our case. So this project is actually providing an element that the town was otherwise planning to actually fund publicly. So
That's Cary Transportation is working.
Correct. Yeah, Cary's been monitoring this road. They've been working with us to try and determine the best solution. We're perfectly fine recommending, a double yellow center line and offset edge lines for the bike lanes, which could be done as part of this project or could be done as a separate town project. But obviously it changes jurisdiction, so Town of Cary was working with us to make sure it was consistent.
Would they ever consider something else to do traffic abatement? I mean, speed tables aren't really something you put on a collector, but what?
One thing we could look at is putting, so instead of having the buildings that close, doing something similar with tall vertical vegetation. It still gives you that feeling of massing. It would have to be out of the right of way and everything, but it could be fairly close to the right of way, and it would still get that option. I can't say that that's something the applicant would be
No,
working on right now, because I don't have any time.
It's fine.
And they don't have a layout yet.
Is the applicant locked into the stormwater control locations that are shown on page 90 of the PUD application? If that's where they showed it schematically?
My understanding is those are approximate locations and subject to change, but I would ask the engineer to give me a yes or a no. Are you locked into the space, to the locations that the stormwater SCMs are shown?
That is, once the site is designed, we're gonna choose the best spot for drainage, elevation, things like that kind of things.
So these are illustrative and just to demonstrate potential options. Thank you, Anna.
So I have a further question on it. As Ms. McGee talked about water earlier, so this site, the improvements would not impact her adversely more than she's already impacted, correct?
That's the way that our ordinance is written and the way that it's required to be designed. Now, some things to keep in mind, the ordinance, the town's ordinance actually requires more stormwater mitigation than the town of Cary does.
Right.
Town of Cary only requires the 1 year. I talked to one of our stormwater specialists today and got all the details for that. We actually require the 1 year and the 10-year storm, but it's only for the first hour. And that's because after the first hour, pretty much every SCM is going to get overwhelmed. So in any very large storms, any SCM that gets put out there is going to have minimal effects at that point. But almost all of the storms that we get fall within that category. I mean, we get a handful or so every year that go above and beyond that. And I know that we can all think of at least a couple that have happened in the last couple of years, but that mitigates the vast majority of our storms. And so, yes, if these are designed and maintained correctly, then they should not impact Ms. McGee's property at all. I did get the name right. Did I get the name right? Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna.
Sorry, one quick thing that I meant to state and follow up to your question, Reggie. We actually do have part of our, the town's stormwater department. They went out and spoke to Ms. McGee earlier, but they're also investigating why there seem to be additional impacts out there and if there's anything additional that we can do to minimize that.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, so I have one other of my comments that I wanted the audience, the people that came and took the time to speak to hear. I was the representative from this body to the mayor's affordable housing working group that took about probably a year and a half, had a lot of industry experts. We had a lot of community input. It was a really big project for the town. The town was really committed to affordable housing. And the part that was really eye-opening for me, which I'm not sure any of you are aware of, is many of the people that work for this town can't afford to live in this town. Our first responders that serve you can't afford to live in this town. And the grocery clerk who rings up your groceries at Publix, she may not be able to afford to live in this town. This is a real problem as we grow. We're squeezing those people out. So the town made a multi-million-dollar commitment to affordable housing, and they've done it in 16 different ways, which I don't have time to tell you. One of those ways was to modify the land use map, which Shelley did a good job of showing you at the very beginning. And we identified, what was that, half a dozen areas that would be apartment only. And we did that because those areas were specifically found to be appropriate for apartments. So someone got up and said, this is not an appropriate location. Actually, the professionals who do urban planning said, yes, this is an appropriate location. And I'm a big advocate of this apartment only designation. And I know it's shocking, especially 3 or 4 of you got up and said, when I moved here, I didn't know. I have to tell you, you should have done your due diligence to look. It was in the map. It was in the zoning map when you moved in, even except for one person who was here 30 years. Okay, everybody else who got up and said I was here 17 years or 7 years or 6 years, when you moved in, this was zoned commercial. You would have known there could be 5-story buildings. So I have to say, turn that around on the turntable and say, okay, I should have done that due diligence. I didn't know that. I got used to an empty lot and the Christmas trees and the pumpkins, and that's all great. But it could end up being a shopping mall. And then you'd be really unhappy, and there'd be nothing we could do. Nothing we could do, because it's already approved 22 years ago, 30 years ago, okay? Way before that. So what I would say is open your mind to that apartment only is good for you. It's not just good for the people living in those apartments, it's good for the town, and that makes it better for you. And remember, in your invocation, Reggie said, we're here to serve the people of Apex, so God guide us as we do that. And I think this is in the public interest, even though it's going to be really shocking for all of you when these apartment buildings go up, because you're used to open space. And if somebody won the lottery and wanted to buy these lots and make it open space, we'd all be singing hallelujah. That didn't happen, so I'm done. No, that's not how it works. Sorry.
The public comment section is already closed.
Yeah.
So do we have any potential motions or additional questions for staff and the applicant?
Were you heading towards a condition you wanted to add? Were you thinking of a condition?
No, I think the staff report and staff support, their explanation answered my questions.
Well, there's a lot of good things with this project, obviously, some things we've been working forward to. The parking, I'm really concerned with. I still haven't, I'm not really convinced that we have enough parking on it. I don't, the traffic impact analysis, it's not a good, it's busy. It's going to be busy after improvements, really. And staff has gone above what NCDOT has recommended. So I'm fairly convinced with that. But the parking, the 239 apartments, and we were saying, 383 parking spaces. Is that correct? So the 37%. And then we're having affordable housing, and then 5% of those are going to be for EV. And so, I mean, it was already constrained, and then we're going to constrain it more with it. Well, I guess there'll be some EV, but the affordable housing people probably would not have a Tesla. But I'm just not so sure that that lack of parking is going to be picked up by the plan, by the transit plan. I don't know how many people is really going to be using that. I just would hate to do this. I would rather either add parking, whether it be structurally up and down, or then have it out on Laura Duncan part, or reduce density, or in this case, I would probably even think about maybe reducing some green space, but the green space is across the road, so that's not an option. But the parking is a concern for me.
I would counter that, Mr. Braswell, and say that Uber, ride share, and work from home might be.
Well, you got a point. Yeah, a lot of people are more working from home, me included, yeah.
I don't know too many people who buy a home and then they Uber to work. Or
Well,
ride share.
yeah, I don't know.
There's just not, I just don't think this is feasible. I think what we're trying to do is put a round peg into a square hole, and we come up with this idea of where we think we'd like to put something. It would look good, it would look pretty, in these certain areas, because we're out of space, and we need to maximize density, but we're out of space. And so we say, well, let's take this and let's see if we can just make it work. And I think there's, between the school issue being right, if the school wasn't there, actually it might even be better. But what happens is it kind of attracts people to, if I live here, I could go to school there, I could walk there, but then you have all the other issues. The parking, there's not enough parking. It's not enough parking. The RCA in the green space, that's on the back. Nobody else is going to be able to see that. It's in the back of these properties. No one who's going to purchase there is going to be able to enjoy the green space that could be there used as RCA. It's not visible. It's just going to be a lot. And the grade separations for Laura Duncan, you know, if that does go through, whether it's underground or overground, that's going to seemingly it's going to cut off access east-west on Old Apex Road. Either way it goes, it's going to cut off access on Laura Duncan somehow. I just think there's too many different things that are going on to say I feel comfortable with approving this. It's not like there's one condition that we can kind of say, well, I think that we could change this and we'll be okay. Or if by the time it goes to council, if we make some amendments, it'll be okay. There's just a lot. There's a lot going on. I feel concerned with this area, with this intersection. It's already kind of dangerous. I do believe that Mr. Herring brought up a very good point, and I appreciate that he made the time to make this map. I hate that he's not here to hear this, but you know, he's future planning. He's thinking ahead of what could be coming down, you know, down the road. No pun intended. With this, I don't have support for it myself personally. I couldn't get behind it. I think there's just too much going on, too many moving parts to say I feel comfortable with proceeding forward with it. So with that, I just don't have the support.
So would you make a motion then to decline?
Tim, one quick for Shelley. If we vote no, what is the parking situation then?
If you vote not to recommend approval,
If this doesn't get approved and it goes back to the zoning 30 years ago, where does that leave us with parking and RCA?
we have no RCA.
Okay.
And we have very minimal buffers because of the way this site was approved.
Okay.
The parking would follow the standards in the old ordinance, which sometimes require more and sometimes require less. It's difficult to say, but it depends on the use. But there is no maximum parking requirement for commercial or for anything, honestly, in the old ordinance. So we could end up with small buildings with a sea of parking. One option that I might be able to discuss with the developer after this meeting would be to discuss whether or not they'd be willing to ask the adjacent property owners right here, the businesses that are already there, if they would be willing to allow a shared use of their parking at night for overflow people, for guests and family and friends. We've had a discussion, but they didn't want to pursue that with the owners at the time until site plan, because they wanted to know what they had to work with. We're not gonna be able to iron that out tonight, but I can have a conversation with them afterwards, just as an FYI. I don't expect that to change your vote. It is more a piece of information for you all to have, that I can continue that conversation.
That could possibly alleviate some things, but when it's raining, people want to park next to their place.
I understand.
They're not going to go across the road. I just don't see that as being a long-term solution, sharing a parking lot. I think it needs to have its own legs. I understand, Jeff, what you're saying. You know, the devil that we know is in front of us, right? The devil we don't know could be in the future.
Yeah.
Well, it's also been 30 years. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but I think the sentiment also in the room here too is, well, even if it did go commercial and had residential over top, but it served a community that's right adjacent to it, you know, that could still be a better option potentially. You know, if lowering the density and having more of a mixed use.
Yeah, but here's the problem with that. This has got a 30-year-old zoning. So somebody could come here tomorrow. If we say no tonight, somebody could come in here tomorrow, especially if they're listening to this in live stream, and say, whoa, I didn't realize we had this gold mine there. We could put whatever we want. We could literally put wherever we want. We'll not see it. The town council won't see it. Their hands will be tied. So this is something I really want us to really think hard about. If we say no tonight, the potential is the people that got up and very emotionally told us that they were concerned about a 4-story building could be back yelling about a 5-story building, but we won't even have a vote. We will not be allowed to vote. So, and the parking could be worse, could be better, could be worse, right? And Russell already told us that he said that he thinks the most likely situation would not be grade separated of Lord Duncan and North Salem. It would be grade separated with CSX, right, Russell? Did I hear you right? So when you said you're going to end up with, unrestricted, that's not what Russell said. So I'm in favor of this. I'm in favor of this not just because I was part of the planning with the town to really understand why we needed this apartment-only designation that then the town council submitted. So that is just one of the kind of a brick that says if we're going to have apartments only in this town to serve all these other issues that I've talked about, then this is actually a perfect place, and it's way better than having this be a mini Walmart. I wouldn't want to live next to a mini Walmart. I'd rather live next to apartments. And the parking, I'm not a parking expert. You guys know more about parking than I do, right? But the town, I guess I'll ask this of Shelley. It sounded to me when I read it, and then when I heard you tonight, it sounds like this isn't the developer twisting your arm to have less parking. This was something you felt good about, that the parking was going to be lower, but also EV and all these other things. So did I misread that, or is this something that the developer really was twisting your arm on?
The developer did not twist our arm on it. This was actually a request directly from one of our council members to reduce that parking level so that it would encourage people to use alternative means of travel, whether that be your Uber and rideshare or the bus system through there.
With a bus stop outside of that neighborhood, basically.
Right, with one on each side of the road to be developed.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up. And then the last comment I'll make is, and nobody knows what's going to happen in the future, but of my 2 children, one doesn't own a car. She chooses not to have a car, and she'd love to live here if she was here in this state. Unfortunately, I'd like her to come back, but if she lived here, this is where she'd live, because she doesn't want to own a car. She's in that generation that says cars are bad for the environment, I don't need a car, it's too expensive. I'll take public transit, Uber, whatever. So yes, she would actually go to work.
And I think that would work in some areas that are probably a little bit more.
That's not a good argument. It's not a good argument.
Hey, Reggie, might.
Public comment section is closed, folks. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. And I think, in a more urban area where you do have walkable, places you can go to go do your shopping or whatever it is, but this is just kind of an area that's slightly an outlier. And we're kind of making it an urban area. It's kind of like this one little urban area in this little 10 acres, boom, and here it is. So I just don't, and I understand where you come from. I just can't get behind it personally. My one vote's most likely not going to make a difference here, but that's just, I have to vote with what I believe is right. So.
So we're still in need of a motion.
I'll make a motion. So I'll make a motion that we approve it as it was presented tonight by Shelley with no additional conditions.
So we have an outstanding motion. Do we have a second?
I think I will second it, but here's why. And everything you said, Mr. Steele, about this having vast improvements for the people of Apex, I also want to be very clear that the folks that are in the room, Town of Cary, I want to, pull something from a Town of Cary council member, Jennifer Robinson. It may be over your district. There's only 13% of the land left in the Town of Cary. We have more in Apex because we're expanding westward. Well, I guess Cary is too. They're taking over Chatham County. Actually, I guess we are too now. She is known, Jennifer Robinson is very crafty, been on council for 20-some years, and you've seen the evolution of the Town of Cary. It went from, oh my gosh, we don't want any more density, to now the mentality is let's wait for great. And I want to be very clear that I'm not going to support this because what if we get something worse? This should stand on its own. And a lot of things that were said give great merit to the town of Apex, namely the affordable housing, which we really need, apartment units, which we really need for the people that work for the town of Apex, and more just the area in general. We need more housing. We still haven't dug out from the Great Recession in 2009, 10, and 11 when building permits went down to 4,500 a year. People are moving here at 180 people a day. We're not building fast enough. We simply need more density. So I empathize with the people, and Mr. Patey, I hear you, it's not right, but as a region, it very much is. And the town of Cary is central to all 13 communities, and most people with Apple and all these mega campuses coming, they want to be here. They want to be in the best town, the peak of living. So I'm 100% behind it, for sure. I'll second.
Affordable housing at 7 years is a minimum of 7 years. So at 7 years, they can get rid of the affordable housing and we're just back to regular. I mean, it's not then serving.
Even if it's
people.
market rate rent and they're charging $2,000 for a one bedroom, what's
Well, that defeats
30% of your
purpose of
income?
Affordable housing though, if you can't go past 7 years, I just don't,
You know, affordable housing is, you gotta start someplace. I mean, we're literally, if we got two, remember last week or last month, 2 units. You were like, okay, got 2.
One of the solutions to housing affordability is to create more housing so that the Class A becomes eventually Class D. That just happens through. Right.
And by the way, I should have been more clear. Thank you for making that comment. Apartment only isn't part of it. It's not affordable housing per se, but it helps the overall affordability issue by having, because apartments are less expensive than townhomes or homes. So it's I should have said affordability issue.
So Shelley, the 7-year term for affordable housing, is that something negotiable, or is that basically how we work things now for UDOs?
So that's after a variety of iterations. The way that CJ Valenzuela does this with the various applicants that we work with is he actually takes what the market rate is, and then he takes the amount that Wake County shows as being affordable, and he says, look, how much can you afford to give us, how much money can you afford to lose, essentially? And he negotiates. I've been given the pleasure of sitting in on a couple of these to see how he works. An amount of affordability, so are we targeting 100% AMI, which is the area median income for the people who aren't aware of that? Are we targeting 80%, or are we targeting 70%? In this case, he wanted to get to that more deeply affordable product, and the trade-off was a shorter time span. We could have looked at 80% for 10 years, and that was the initial offer for the applicant. But because this is apartments and because it's where it's located in fairly close proximity to a wide variety of employment options, he thought that going for the more deeply affordable option for a shorter period of time would be better in this location. You all have seen a variety of projects come forward with different numbers, different times, and different affordability ratios, and different percentages of the units. And so that's something that he looks at on an ongoing basis, kind of based on where they are, where their proximity to services is, what the location to major roads and businesses and employment opportunities.
This is why in the working group that we did, one of our first recommendations right out of the gate was to hire him.
Yes.
Because you need an expert to do this work.
It is not something that the rest of the planning staff.
And then the other thing to remember is, many months ago, we looked at a whole area near Walmart where the entire thing would be affordable housing.
Right.
That required a state and federal grant money.
Yep.
Right? So don't confuse that with what he's doing for us at the town. 2 here, 12 here, 12 tonight, 6 tomorrow, and eventually you just gotta do what you can do.
And for 239 units, 5% of that is 11 to 12 units, which is, I think, more than we've gotten with any of our other developments that I'm aware of. There could be some others. But as far as a flat number, And it is for people who are making 70% of the AMI, which is, I think the area median income is something like $60,000 or something. It's higher than that.
No, you're thinking about
Amanda's doing that.
family. You're thinking of a family.
Yeah.
Single person's
It's-
like 30.
So it's pretty significant. But it is a result of a negotiation that we worked out with the developer. And the reason I didn't read you the whole language is it's a lot of technical stuff.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So if there are no more comments from the board, we're going to continue with this motion and the second that we already have. Are there any other comments?
I would just say, you know, considering everything, and I'm a very big supporter of affordable housing in Apex, but just listening to all of the concerns and transportation, traffic, and things like that, and the parking issue as well, I don't think I can support this plan as well as is. I think the density is too high for the area, knowing it, you know, as it is today.
So if there are no more comments from the board, we'll go ahead and go to our vote since we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those who oppose?
No.
No.
So we have 3 noes.
So I need to list the reasons for the dissenting votes. I wrote down what you just said, parking too low, traffic in the area is dangerous, density is too high. Were there other reasons from the other 2 no votes?
I think you covered it, for me personally.
Yeah, well, there's several things. I mean, I didn't really care for the RCA being off-site and then using that as part of this project. I mean, I understand it's right adjacent to it, but it's still kind of a sleight of hand, it seems like to me. It's a good thing that the person owns this property. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to use it. I think also that intersection as far as for pedestrians, if we're gonna try to look at the local elementary school, I think there needs to be some more thought planning into, you know, kind of how we could get kids over to that side. That and the school is currently, it sounds like, obviously, I don't know this to be fact, but if it's currently capped, and even though Wake County can take in these kids, the kids, you know, the parents who move there may or may not understand that their kids may not be able to go to that school. So that may not be a fact, but it's obviously it's temporarily it's an issue. That's it.
All right. So if I understand right, this passes with a 4-3 vote, Diane. All right, thank you.
You want to take a bio break?
I think we need a few-minute break, yes, before we move on to item 7. Five-minute recess, so we'll come back here at 7:05. Thank you.
Can't turn it off.
I try, you know what? Did they change it?
Yes, I can't turn it off.
The council will hear.
Somebody must have like open meetings, mute the You know your shit, man. Thank you.
Missing a couple.
I needed that.
Jeff on his way back in.
Did we lose Jeff?
We lost Jeff. Diane, without Jeff, can I start?
And Mr. Royal?
And Mr. Royal? All right.
I think Mr. Royal was talking in front. Someone. I saw it.
I like that. I want to see if I can grab it.
We promised to be nice.
All right, we will resume with item number 7 with Amanda Bunce to talk about a rezoning case number 22CZ03, Sweetwater PUD.
So this is an amendment to the Sweetwater PUD, and as you know, Sweetwater is located on the south side of 64 at Richardson Road. And this portion of Sweetwater, it's just the commercial mixed-use portion north of Core Banks Road. Acreage is approximately 44 acres. The east side of Richardson Road is mostly clear as the mixed-use development is under construction. We do have the daycare that's been constructed in this part of the PUD. There are two parcels on the north side of this section of the PUD that are yet to be developed, and future non-residential development is anticipated for the west side of Richardson Road. As far as zoning, like I said, it's plan unit development conditional zoning, as is most of the surrounding zoning. And it is designated as mixed use on the land use map. So there are, just to give a little more background, the Sweetwater was originally approved in early 2015, with the most recent amendment being approved in late 2018. The applicant did hold their neighborhood meeting in January, and you have that report. There are three proposed changes to the PUD. The first amendment is to reduce the minimum amount of office square footage that's required by the PUD. And so the reduction would be from 80,000 to 55,000 square feet of office. A new condition is added at the request of the Environmental Advisory Board. It's the only suggested condition that the applicant added from the EAB meeting, and that's at least one pet waste station shall be installed near the hotel if the hotel permits pets. And then finally, the last proposed amendment, and I know this is a lot of text, but this is really the main purpose of the PUD amendment, and that is to remove the requirement that they reserve right-of-way for the future interchange at 64 and Richardson Road. And Russell's going to come and speak to a lot of this, but essentially this text reserving the interchange right-of-way has been in the PUD since the initial rezoning. And so I'm going to turn it over to Russell to present these next slides and kind of tag teaming here.
And you get me tonight because Shannon Cox is on vacation. It's my understanding she'll be back for council, and they'll get her for that meeting. So first of all, there was a corridor study done for US 64. This was a multi-agency, multi-jurisdictional study. Apex actually put in funding, as did County Kerry, at Wake County, Chatham County, the MPO. NCDOT actually led the study. So it is designated as a strategic highway corridor, so it's very important to regional mobility. And the goal, as you can see, is to develop a master plan to preserve and enhance that mobility and safety along the corridor. So this plan, the intent of the plan was to guide development and improvements along the corridor all the way from US 64 Business in Pittsboro to US 1 in Cary. So it's a very long corridor study. And you can see here just a snapshot of it. These individual numbers are the windows of plan sheets that were included in the study. So you're basically looking at Apex jurisdiction all the way into Cary from the Chatham County line all the way to US 1. Those were sheets 12 through 22 of the short-term and long-term improvements. So our transportation plan also reflects future interchanges that were shown in the plan. So that's NC 7051 at New Hill Road, Richardson Road, Laura Duncan Road, and Lake Pine Drive. So all those are designated as future interchanges in our plan, and that is consistent with the corridor study. And if you look at the current status of these interchanges, and I can go very quickly through this, it's a lot of information, but at NC 751 and New Hill Road, NCDOT is working on concepts for that interchange. They currently plan to start obtaining right-of-way in 2029, so that is a project that we believe is moving forward. As far as development status goes, the Project Real just recently approved. Part of that approval, that rezoning, was dedicating right-of-way for the interchange at NC 751. And the 2050 projection on NC 751 New Hill Road is about 18,800 vehicles per day, which is more than you currently have out there at North Salem Street at US 64 today. So to put it in perspective, that's currently an interchange at 64. This would be higher than that volume. As far as Richardson Road, which is what we're talking about today, the short-term solution, which was the Super Street, has been implemented by the Sweetwater Development. They currently have plans to expand and improve that with dual turn lanes and traffic signals as part of the commercial development that's approved as part of the rezoning. The long-term solution, the interchange, is not yet programmed, and it's not a commitment of the development either. But the PUD did reserve right-of-way using an alternate concept that has been approved by NCDOT and Town of Apex. The 2050 projections on that road, on Richardson Road, are 29,500 vehicles per day, so very high. You're looking at a 4-lane roadway, which is also in our long-range plans. Kelly Road has since been constructed, have the NC 540 interchange since the study was originally done. That was part of the NC 540 project. And both the Laura Duncan Road and Lake Pine Drive interchanges are part of the US 64 project, the TIP project that DOT had on the books that has since been delayed, like a lot of TIP projects in Apex, around 2030 and beyond, where we would expect construction of that project. But that is a real project moving forward at some time in the not too distant future. So the evolution of these, of the rezoning of Sweetwater, if you look first at 2014 was the first year where there was an initial condition to reserve this area for the future interchange there at Richardson Road. In 2016, there was a rezoning again of the PUD, but there was no change to that condition. In 2017, there was a rezoning and there was a modification which it was revised to allow parking within that reservation area. So we recognized the need for the developer to be able to use that reservation area for some kind of temporary purpose, understanding that we don't want things put in that reservation area that would be problematic in the future to remove. And in 2018, it came forward again for another rezoning, not related to the interchange reservation, so no change at that time. And now in 2022, the proposal is before you to remove that interchange reservation in its entirety. So the interchange condition as it reads, and I'll try and read this out for you, the developer shall propose a conceptual design for the future interchange US 64 if offered as an alternative to the interchange recommended in the US 64 corridor study. Reservation of future public right-of-way for the interchange shall be determined based on Town of Apex and NCDOT review and approval of the interchange concepts, if not based on the US 64 corridor study. This reservation shall be included in development plans and occur at the time of platting parcels for the development adjacent to US 64. So the condition that was after 2 rezonings later, what was amended was surplus parking and related facilities, lighting, landscaping, and storm drainage, etc., can be constructed within the future interchange area, with the understanding that these improvements may be removed in the future. The developer shall make the necessary provisions to accommodate future loss of parking by appropriate site planning, including addition of a 50-foot Type A buffer behind the reservation area. So as you can see in this image, you see a large image of Sweetwater with all the residential to the south and the commercial parcels to the north, showing that right-of-way reservation line and then zoomed in. So it's important to note, I mean, the overall size of the development is not just the commercial parcels, but it did include all the residential to the south as well as part of this PUD. And that right-of-way reservation line was based on, as the zoning condition stated, a revised plan provided to us. So the US 64 corridor study did look at a conceptual design for the interchange, which used quite a bit more right-of-way than what the applicant proposed. They worked with their engineer to come forward with a design that the town and NCDOT were agreeable to, reducing the impact. So we felt that was important to give them that opportunity. That was part of the zoning. Our understanding is, of course, if DOT comes in, they're going to have to do a full study, and what happens is the more you reduce that right-of-way, the more constrained it is, the more difficult it is in the future to construct. So you might have to put in retaining walls and other things to try and put an interchange in a reduced footprint. However, NCDOT said based on the information at the time, they had no reason to object to what was proposed by the applicant. And there was traffic analysis behind it as well, so it was a full review. Okay, so you can see here where in pink you have the existing right-of-way for Richardson Road and US 64. And then in red, you have the conceptual right-of-way for the interchange that is shown. And then in orange, you have current right-of-way reservation area in the PUD. So if you can understand that. My color blindness is not helping me, but it's lots of colors, so if you need to assist, that's fine. So what we have on the table today is just they're asking to remove the interchange condition. So what that would mean is there's no additional right-of-way dedication on US 64. It would be existing right-of-way on US 64 plus the required buffer, and then they would be able to put whatever buildings, parking, any site elements, stormwater, anything they want within that area. And what that means, for the future, and this may be part of Amanda's remaining presentation, or is this part of this one? I'm not sure.
That's the end of it.
Okay. So what that means is, if NCDOT comes forward in the future, which as you see, the status of these various projects, NCDOT is moving forward in various stages, 4 different interchange locations and various projects. It means that you could have buildings in the way of a future interchange. You could have critical site elements in the way of a future interchange. We see those concerns in areas like Laura Duncan, for example, where they built the Primrose Daycare adjacent to the interchange. And when they came forward with those plans, it was a huge deal with the town, both for staff and for our political representatives, dealing with an owner that it's their livelihood, it's their business, and all of a sudden NCDOT's taking their livelihood and their business away. That's what we want to prevent for the future. We understand the concerns with reserving land for the future, but that's the purpose. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, the town gets blamed when we approve development plans in a way that's maybe not seen as responsible after the fact by people that are impacted. So, any questions following up? Or? Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Russell.
So Russell did a good job, summarizing the concerns and why the staff can only recommend approval of the rezoning if the proposal to remove this condition, we can only recommend approval if they withdraw the request to remove this text. So from a land use perspective, it's consistent with the land use map, but it is not consistent with the transportation plan and the US 64 corridor study. And the proposed rezoning is not in the public interest because the amendments to the existing PUD to remove the reservation of right-of-way for the interchange will likely result in design constraints and/or higher cost and higher impacts of construction related to demolition of improvements, including buildings and parking. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Yes.
If they agreed to leave this in, would they also leave in that partial sentence that's part of the paragraph before?
Yes, essentially all of the existing text would remain if
including that to accommodate the ultimate design.
Correct.
Okay, good. Correct. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Any questions?
I have a question, sorry. Beginning, we talked about the pet waste station. I know this is pretty small, but if the hotel permits pets, should that also be allowed? I mean, service animals would be using a hotel as well. Just a question around that.
I think that we would interpret it that way, but, that's assuming that there will be a hotel.
So true. Okay. Just want to, maybe we put that in there because I know, you have to accept service animals, whether the hotel accepts pets or not.
True, so the applicant could amend the wording to be pet way station 4 if the hotel allows pets. Well, you're saying regardless because they have to allow service animals. So to strike the last part of that condition. So the applicant, that would be up to the applicant to amend the language, but I think staff would be supportive of that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Amanda? Does the applicant want to say anything?
How's everybody doing today? Mitch Craig with the CE Group, here representing the owner. I want to thank y'all for having us, and Amanda did a very good job of presenting what we're coming here to talk to you about, and so I don't have a whole lot to say. I do want to let you know that I'm here to answer any questions. We also brought our leasing agent, Marvin Waldo, who's here to answer any questions you may have about the reduction in the office space and the hindrance that the reservation puts on this property. Also brought the traffic engineer from Ramey Kemp, if you guys have any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for the applicant?
I think you're about to answer the questions.
Hello, I'm Marvin Waldo. My company is Retail Strategies. I'm a native of Raleigh, and my late mother was a native of Apex, grade 1 through 11. We have designed, aside from any of these arguments, what we believe will be one of the most significant and important gathering places for Apex residents that anyone could ever do. The architecture, the design, everything's off the chart of this project. As we got into this, and I was given the task of trying to figure out how to let someone use parking in something, I found everywhere I went, I couldn't get a deal. I couldn't get it done that way. And the hotel, which is something we're going to push so very hard for, because we believe the town wants a hotel there, and a nice one with some meeting space. But hotel designs, there's 4 acres up there in that, 2 of which is, a little bit less than 2 is right in that reservation area. I need all 4 acres to make that hotel deal, and there's no other place on the site for it. The hotels now have, because of COVID, they have gotten more open space and more outdoor space. And in addition, I think the town, I feel the need for a 10,000 foot or so, something like that, meeting area, which also increases the hotel's food preparation area to make that work for the town. But to be honest with you, from my perspective, what I'm saying to you is this is like the icing on the cake of this project for us, and we believe that it can be just an incredible hotel site, but it just isn't going. I mean, nobody's going to shut down for a year and build a parking deck when it stops. That stuff just doesn't work. I really gave it a good effort with some people and some hoteliers. Financing won't work for it. A lot of stuff won't work for it. So, we're simply asking you to let us ice this cake properly and to believe in the interchange that's there, and to that, Rhino can speak.
Good evening, Ronald Stevenson with Ramey Kemp Associates, and I'll just kind of quickly explain what Marvin was talking about. Is when we did the original traffic study for the site, and a couple studies since then, we did consider the site entirely fully built out, and we did look at this at-grade intersection configuration that, as Russell indicated, is partially built now and will be expanded to essentially double the capacity that's there today. And with that, the intersection been accessed. Richardson Road 64 is expected to work at an adequate level of service. So we have accounted for this. Even removing the right-of-way reservation area, we're not asking for increased density, more traffic than what we already studied and is approved. I think what you heard was more of being able to get folks there, and we intended to use it for parking and that kind of stuff anyway, but we can't, as you heard, they're having trouble doing that, so we're not really going to ask for more density there. It's just to be able to use it, I think, the uses that we had in the traffic study. So we're not asking for more traffic. All that's been looked at. The improvements that are identified, currently built, and are about to be built, the expansion of it's all been done and approved. But that's all the at-grade solutions. We're basically building that intersection out as big as you can make it. So as part of this project. Yes, sir.
So it sounds like you disagree with Russell, that you believe that the current intersection, not as it's built today, but as you're planning to build it out at grade, will be permanently great and will never need to be improved. Russell's and the DOT thinks it's going to need to be improved as part of the study that he referenced. So it sounds like the two of you disagree. So can you be more explicit with us? Why do you disagree with the DOT?
Well, let me explain. Let me explain what we're kind of charged with in looking at this. So when the development takes on the undertaking of a traffic study, their purpose is to look at their development's impacts on the road system and be able to mitigate that. So we look at what's the traffic that this development's going to generate, add all that traffic when it's all built out, add it to the roads, and then figure out how to make the roads work to handle that. And that's what we did. So that's why there's the intersection that's there today. That's not a full movement, signalized intersection. It's a limited movement intersection, and that's about to be expanded or essentially doubled as part of the commercial site. So that's what we've done. What Russell and DOT is looking at is well off into the future. So I can't remember if it's 2050 or something. It's well off into the future. And I may have that year wrong, but that's what we were charged with as a development, is to look at when this thing is done, fully built out, can you handle the traffic that's there, and what do you have to do to handle that traffic, and that's what's been done.
Got it. So thank you for the answer. That's a good refresher for us that your purpose is really just your impact. Russell and DOT have to look long range, and so thanks for clarifying that. So, however, if we took this paragraph out, then it will tie the hands of the DOT in the town of Apex in the future, let's say 2030. I think that was when you were talking 2030, 2050, whatever. At that point, there'll be a building there. And we don't want to have a Primrose Daycare times 10 with a hotel where we have to move the hotel. It's not going to happen. So it effectively ties the hands of the DOT. So any comment on that?
As Russell mentioned also, when we first started looking at this, the original design that was granted was sort of a concept. It was basically lines on a paper. There was no real true design. Was different than the one that we came up with as part of this project. So there's different ways to do it. We got creative when we were faced with the challenge of looking at this. When the development moved forward, we got creative, kind of looked at different design alternatives. There could be other options when DOT moves forward. I mean, it's not programmed yet. It's not a funded project. So, there could be other options that they could explore at the time, and they may have to get creative. And I think Russell may mention this too. There could be retaining walls and, just steeper, tighter construction, potentially with some other design that they could accommodate. They would have to get creative like we did. When we were looking at this, we had to take the original design or idea, modify it to make it sort of fit with what we were doing. They'll have to do the same thing when they come in.
It's too bad you couldn't, and I know that's probably not going to happen, Russell. It's too bad that you couldn't get the DOT to sit down with them and you and come up with a design that works for the hotel long term, and works for DOT long-term, but is that just a fantasy? Yeah, that was the question. Sorry, that was the question, Russell. Is that something that could be achieved? Or is that just too far off?
The design that was proposed to Apex and to DOT that we basically signed off on was a compressed design. So there comes a point where you can only compress an interchange so much, and keep in mind, we're talking about half of an interchange here. We're not talking about just one quadrant. So I don't know that you can do any better. You know, certainly you could have an exercise where you sat down with DOT and you looked at a site plan and they came up with a design, but they've not proposed that exercise. We've not been through that exercise to propose an even tighter footprint or different footprint than that with a site plan that indicates that. So I can't really answer it. I mean, what we were provided was traffic analysis for the interchange, for the compressed design of the interchange, and there was a certain build out year tied to that. Most of the stuff around Apex now is around 2030, slightly beyond that as far as construction schedule. You're getting into the unfunded years of the TIP, so certainly some of the projects long range, like the other US 64 interchanges, could be pushed back a little bit further. But the 2050 traffic projection is what we pointed out here, was just under 30,000 vehicles a day, which is over like twice what you got out there on North Salem Street today. So it's very busy. So we know at some point, 2030 and beyond, you know, you're going to start to bump up against the capacity of what the super street can handle with a 4-lane section on US 64 with dual turn lanes.
Got it. Thank you both.
So no more questions for the applicant. I guess I'll pull it back to the board for any further discussion or possible motion.
Actually, I do have one more question. I didn't want to go off topic. I know the interchange is a big question, but I was just curious as to, I didn't think that maybe I did not hear this, or maybe I did. What is the purpose of reducing 25,000 in office space? I know right now the focus is only on the interchange, but, and we're talking about expand, from what I heard was places are expanding out because of COVID, which gave a bigger footprint, but does that just mean we're going to lower the height as well? Is that how we're getting down?
Experience One Homes, I'm actually one of the owners of the property and the developer. I actually live in Sweetwater. The intent here, we originally had proposed about a 35,000 square foot office building up there where that reservation area is. In order to substitute it with the hotel, with the conference center, which the town has told us, you have a letter from Chamber.
From the chamber?
Yeah, I don't know, I can't get her name in my head right now.
Shannon Flair.
Shannon, yeah. She actually was our first homeowner in the neighborhood, you know, supporting what we wanted to do by putting a hotel in the conference center, because right now, anytime Apex wants to hold a conference, you have to go someplace else. So that's the reason we're asking for the reduction in the amount of office space. Substitute where that 35,000 square foot office building was up there and put the hotel in its place. That's the reason for that reduction.
So it's more or less just a trade-off.
Yes.
Office to hotel.
That's all it is. And one thing I want to say about the reservation area, it's really kind of tying our hands here. And when we started the project back in 2014, we were given information that the reservation area was only good for 3 years after we filed a site plan, which we have now. And come to find out that information was not correct. The problem with using the area up there and for parking only is what Marvin just said. It's tied his hand because the hotel, knowing potentially in the future that you're going to take half their parking away from them, it would be the same as a complete take-in. So whether the building is in that reservation area or the parking with the hotel behind a reservation area, the DOT would have to buy the whole thing anyway.
Either way.
So it doesn't save the DOT any money, but it allows us, by removing the reservation area, to at least get the hotel to go in there, and then 25 or 30 or 40 years down the road, whenever that overpass gets put in there, they could deal with it at that point. It's not marketable property right now because our hands are tied that way.
As a hotel.
As a hotel or pretty much anything else. If we would, same thing with an office building. You want to put an office building up there, you put the office building outside the reservation area, you put the parking in the reservation area, you got the same problem. The DOT would have to take the building and the parking because you got no place to replace it with.
Couldn't you put the parking under the building?
Oh, that's unbelievably expensive. Podium buildings.
Or you could make a smaller building, but That would affect your economics, right?
Yeah, that's, it. Again, that's kind of like a taking the same way. So it really has tied our hands here.
I don't hear it as a taking because this reservation has been there from the very beginning. So,
Yeah,
so
and
nobody's taking anything tonight from
Well,
you.
with all due respect, when the staff tells you, if you don't agree to this reservation, the council won't approve your project, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, well,
I mean, that's kind of where we put our hands in. Anyway, I'm just giving you information. You all can vote how you see fit, but our hands are tied in trying to do what we want to do up there. Even, and I know Russell was gracious to allow the parking, but the more that we got into that, it's still tying our hands. Happy to answer more questions if you like.
Thank you.
Is there a statute to how long reservation can be granted? Like, if you were to give a proffer, like to say I would do a reservation pending a 10-year sunset, or is it, how long do they last?
Well,
I thought there was legal precedent as far as DOT reservations, because for exactly what would happen.
This is a zoning condition,
Ah,
and there was no sunset in the zoning condition. So it's in perpetuity.
Do you have any comment about his 3-year comment that they thought it was 3 and then they found out later it wasn't?
I have no comment to that. I was not working for the department, or in that, with this case, this was not my project at that time, so I can't speak to that. And it's a reservation area, not a dedication. So they would still be paid for the area to, when DOT would acquire the right-of-way.
I did a case just like this at Briar Creek for a developer, the Hilton, no, it was courtyards, combined courtyards and something. Is at the corner of Little Briar Creek. And we had to do a right-of-way reservation for the city of Raleigh. And that project never happened. It never happened. And finally, the city's like, well, we can't hold you to that forever because you have the right to use your land eventually if DOT doesn't purchase it. Well, fast forward, where are we at today? That project with DOT is actually going forward, and they had to purchase the land back from the hotel person. But the point being is that hotel got to move forward with their plan, with their feasibility at that time. So, I mean, I see it both ways. How long can you hold a developer hostage? 50 years fair? I don't know. I'd rather them just buy it now, but they're probably like, oh, we don't have money. Well, developer can't fund your future plans in 2050. I see that too.
Yeah. It's like a land bank.
Yeah, but it was, I mean, it was also a condition of the rezoning. I remember when Sweetwater first came in, that was a big issue, was that interchange. And that was an agreement that was made. I mean, so I kind of have to see it that way too. It's not like this came out of nowhere and just all of a sudden was just, hey, I didn't know that this condition existed. Now we have to have this area that's set apart for DOT for their future. They knew that as part of Sweetwater. There was big issues with Sweetwater even getting approved. I mean, that was a big legal issue then. And I think this interchange was part of that. And that's the kind of part you kind of don't want to give back either. I mean, it's kind of tough. Also, it looks like we're kind of changing the scope too. It was office buildings, now it's turned to a hotel. And now we're kind of trying to put a hotel in an area and kind of having to change the intersection because of it. We're kind of changing scope now too.
How do hotels, how much employment do hotels, this is a question for us, not you guys, but us. Does anybody here know what kind of employment a hotel creates versus a 55,000 or 85,000 square foot office building? Because I think that was the town's motivation back then, wasn't it? They wanted office space, mixed use office space to create employment. So, and remember, we turned down that self-storage because we created 2 jobs, right? So, does anybody on the planning board know what kind of jobs are created by a hotel? Is it equal to, greater than, less than?
I think the obvious answer is less than.
I don't know. I would think.
How many offices you can have in an office building, and how many employees you can have at a hotel.
Yeah.
I mean, the majority of the lion's share of your employees you can be janitorial.
Yep.
So I don't think that. I think that's.
All right. So I'm gonna go on the assumption that this less than we originally said is a substitution, but it's going to result in less employment, which is probably what the town council was looking for back to the time period you're talking about.
I would agree with that assumption.
Yeah.
But also meeting space within the town.
Right. I mean, there's give and take. I
I'm not so much.
I'd like to make that point. The meeting space will generate substantial revenue to the town. Not to have those meetings.
I can see that.
And maybe possible drop in office space, there's a lot of vacant office space since COVID. So I'm not really concerned so much with the office motel.
That's so true. Now, my wife's the head of HR for a big company.
Yeah, there's a lot of.
You can get them back into the offices out of Regis out there. And the other thing about that I would like to make sure y'all keep in your mind is inside the storefronts in the mixed use, there's tons of office going in there too. Like your insurance guy, your mammography centers, all of that stuff on the storefronts now. Our first deal out there, and I don't really want to tell you exactly who it is, but it's going to be a major healthcare provider. But they want storefronts, and they're going to take, I've got a lease that'll be signed in a week for 14,000 square feet of storefronts. Well, that would have counted against the 80,000 foot anyway. We wouldn't have gone and built another building,
The swap doesn't concern me as much as the right-of-way issue. If they're swapping office for hotel,
it is.
The environment's changes and code and all, but the right-of-way, I think is an issue. But I understand with the office, less deployment, but the environment's changed a little bit too. Granted, as with the office, there's a lot of vacant office. But the right-of-way, I see both sides of it. It was part of the zone. And I see his side, how long do you hold the landowner? How old is the landowner supposed to hold it?
The question I would ask back, maybe Russell, you could answer this. You said that there could still be a solution in the 2050 plan, it just might get expensive because it'll involve retaining walls. And I don't know, are we talking grade separation and like service road, frontage roads?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to speak to, but if this reservation goes away completely, there may not really be a practical solution. Because you're talking about, the right-of-way for the road itself for 64, there's no room for ramps or loops. If you did away with the reservation to the east, you possibly could do a bigger ramp with a loop to the west, but that would increase the reservation needed to the west. So you see what I mean with the interchanges. You can only compress them so much, and if you remove one side, you've got to bulb out the other side. You're not going to realign US 64 north. You've got westward to the north. So obviously that's another issue, is you're maybe pushing more impacts on another development that's already zoned.
Or the DOT says, strike page 14 from the book, or whatever, and says, we're just not going to, then we're locked in. And then you have, as Russell said, at 2030, the projections are the traffic exceeds the safe capacity of that, and now we have an unsafe intersection and nobody can do anything about it.
Right, and
we got plenty of those.
And that's true. And I do want to point out, DOT doesn't have to buy the right of way. The town could buy the right of way. If the town really wants the hotel, the town could make the decision to buy the right of way as well. There's just a cost to the town in that case. So the one way we are able to keep buildings from going in the right of way is to have that reservation.
Yeah, if you all want to buy the right of way from us, we're more than happy to have you do it. I'm not being flippant about this. But you all can sell it to DOT in the future at an increased rate. This thing probably, that overpass probably isn't going for another 25 years. I'm not going to be here to see that, and I'll just make a comment. But to Russell's issue about the retaining walls, what we've already agreed with DOT is that compact diamond, and in order to facilitate that compact diamond, there are retaining walls already there. So what we're talking about is still the reservation area got reduced somewhat, but it is still it's got shackles on us. It was super heartburn.
Can we expand on what he's talking about? So there is a grade separated conversion, would you say it was a diamond? Compact diamond. So there is a solution that could work.
That's the solution that's been presented. So the current reservation has been compressed from what was approved in the US 64 corridor study to what's proposed now. We've not had another alternative interchange design proposed back to us that compresses it even further or modifies it.
Let me repeat that in a question form. Is it true that if we make no change to this, that what will result eventually would be a compressed diamond interchange that, like he just described.
Most likely.
Okay,
That's correct.
so this is making it even smaller. No, so I think that answers my earlier question that said, why can't the three of you get together with DOT and hash it out? And the answer is, it can't get much smaller.
Yep.
And, yeah, so
The
the,
lines we already have on the plans
Yeah.
are using that compact diamond.
yeah, okay, got it. Yeah, so really, if we agree to strike this paragraph, then what we're really saying is, never will be an interchange there. It will always be at grade.
Or the hotel will have to be removed at some
Well,
point. in the
that's
future.
unlikely.
Yeah.
I think that's unlikely, but,
Yeah.
I mean, you just made the price unaffordable. So, I mean, the DOT has a budget too, and they have priorities, and they'll look at it and go, oh, we gotta buy the hotel, forget that. We'll go down the street, we'll do something in Sanford.
Yet another option could be, and we've talked about this before, if an interchange is not practical, if you can't, I mean, they could just eliminate access altogether. You could have a grade separation and just no access on and off US 64, which is also not particularly desirable, but that's.
I live on the north side of that intersection, so let's not go in that direction.
That's right, you do.
But again, that's again a long-term plan, so we don't know if it gets that bad, to that point. US 64 is the strategic highway corridor. Richardson Road is not. The priority will be US 64. So if there needs to be a solution will be found. It just may be a less desirable solution in the long term.
Right.
Is there I guess I'll look to Mitch, is there a layout configuration that could work that would reserve more right away? Or is that like just not a feasible?
The problem is not the layout, it's the actual tenants that are going there. That's not a feasible, to have that reservation area is not it's not feasible for them. They can't even, they were having trouble getting financing on a site like this, from what I understand.
It's impossible. And look, I guess the only point that we would just beg upon everybody to consider, and then we'll take whatever you guys say, is simply that this work in progress, if you're not familiar with Sweetwater Town Center and haven't seen everything that has kept going on it, it's a dream for us to have the village district. The old Cameron Village was 52 acres when Willie York moved that stuff 2 miles from downtown Fayetteville Street. About the same distance we are from Salem Street as an adjunct to. And that's what we're trying to design there, an adjunct to the downtown. And with the meetings, with the event lawn and concerts and everything. And then when we backed up into it, we said, well, gosh, we need a hotel in there to make this all perfect too. And then it became obvious to us in the period of time that David's talking, we had got into this thinking there was going to be a 3-year incubation of whether they would take this or not take it. And that was okay, that moved on. But that's 5 or 6 years ago now, and now we're getting into the weeds of the plan to really see how it affects us. And that's why we're asking for you to look at our project, look at what we're trying to do, and see if it's in the interest of the town to possibly work with us on it. That's all.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, there's a 2-minute and 12-second video on the website that literally drives you through this town center, we're calling it. We're literally building a little micro town out there. I've studied new urban planning for the better part of 35 years, and this is the first opportunity we've had to do a mixed-use development like this. And staff was unbelievably supportive in helping us get this accomplished. But if you go out and look at it, the quality of the architecture, the quality of the plan itself, the event lawn, which is the size of a football field. Now, if you can kind of wrap your minds around that, at one end, it's anchored with a full concert stage with towers that are 40 feet apart. At the opposite end of that event lawn is 2 pavilion structures. And those things, obviously, the concert stage is there so we can hold the concerts, whether that's live music or having DJs up there. The pavilion structures are there so we can do farmers markets, we can do local jewelry shows, we can do wine and cheese tastings, ale tastings. We got a list of about 50 different kinds of events we intend to do there. The pavilion structures, we hardscape that in between those so we can put an ice skating rink in there in the wintertime.
All right.
There isn't anything else in the triangle like this.
It sounds like everything he just described is, could be easily removed at not great expense when the reservation area, if it 30 years from now or whatever got used. So why can't there be a design that puts everything you just described, it sounds wonderful, in the reservation area?
That's under construction.
That's all under.
Okay,
What I
good.
just described is under
Good.
construction.
All right, so
What we're talking about now is the ability to get the hotel up there. We can't make it work the way it is laid out right now. And like I said, if we put the parking field of the hotel in the reservation area, and DOT comes back and takes the reservation area, you're taking the parking field away from the hotel. So not only do they have to take and pay it, but they have to buy the hotel anyway. So whether we put the hotel up front in the reservation area or put the parking field in there, DOT's got to buy all of it anyway. But right now, we can't make a deal with the hotel because they're not going to do it, knowing that potentially in the future, you know, we have to tell them, say, look, they could take your parking away from you. Well, heck, I'm not gonna, you know, I'm not even interested. And that's where we are at this point.
So, planning.
All right, so I have some thoughts. I just argued with a whole room full of angry Cary citizens about how we're following the future land use map. And that's the planning board's goal, is to listen to staff and follow the future land use plan.
Yes.
What these guys are describing sounds awesome, but I think that's a council decision. That if I'm a planning board member, I'm hearing what Mr. Steele said. I love this project. I can't wait to utilize the event lawns. I live right next door. However, I would be doing a contrary service to say, yeah, get rid of it. I think that is a council decision all day long. If they want to weigh the merits of it versus the long-term viability for DOT, looking out for the future,
So Ryan,
I just don't know that I
hear a motion coming from.
Yeah.
because I really want that. It sounds awesome. I live over there. It sounds great. I
Propose a
can't
motion that
wait.
we can get a second
Say
and
one last thing about this, just so it'll come full circle. We do have a grocer commitment right now that we haven't said anything about on the west side. And with that grocer, which is 64,000 square feet, comes a requirement for their fuel center, which right now people are using like crazy because they can get $1 off on their gas. And that would sit adequately in front of the grocer there and would be in that reservation area too. The only other thing we can do there speaks to the diminution of quality of our product, because we would have to move the gas down near Core Banks Road, where I have some cafes designed and everything, and it works better when you get a moment to look at the plan in this thing. So we were hit on both sides of it, running into a brick wall trying to ice the cake properly. That's all.
Yeah, the gas pumps need to
Tim,
be
you
up
wanna say
front
something?
where they are.
Yeah, again, this is interesting. I remember sitting there, listening to the council meeting on Sweetwater, and I just remember that everybody in the council kept on saying all this contiguous acres, all this land that was right there that was gonna be zoned commercial property. And it's interesting, we've got all this property that's back behind it. Are we not gonna expand westward? You know, all that property was zoned commercial then.
You talking about the property west of us?
Yes.
We have nothing to do with that.
Well, I know you don't, but you're talking about not having enough space, but all this was originally designed as having, you know, another additional 50 acres of access back there when Sweetwater was initially done.
We tried to go to Staley Smith to try to get him to let us, it's 30 acres is what's over there, it's not 50, it's 30.
But the 50 contiguous acres is what we kept hearing. This was
Well, no,
many years ago.
We have 45 plus contiguous here for Sweetwater is what we have. As part of the Smith Farms PUD, there's 30 acres of commercial up front. And I will tell you that Bill Jensen was the one that was most negative about Sweetwater. He did everything he could to get it turned down because he didn't believe we were actually going to do the commercial. My son, who is a full partner in the company with me, happened to get put on the steering committee. And when he got put on the steering committee, guess who his partner was? Bill Jensen. And he going like, oh my God, this is gonna be, and as soon as Bill was told that, yes, we are gonna do this commercial center, he said, well, oh wow, I didn't know that. His whole attitude changed towards Sweetwater. Ask him. He didn't think we were gonna do this. The only reason we got this property is because the Lambs didn't want to sell it to somebody who wasn't going to do both sides of the fence. And as soon as I told Vivian Lamb, when I met with her back in late 13, early 14, that I wanted to do a full-blown new urban neighborhood on there, she lit up like a firecracker. Oh, I've been studying this. This is exactly what we want on the property. Everybody's coming in here, wants to leave the commercial up front, just do the residential in the back of the whole thing. We wanted to do exactly what we're doing right here. And to the standard at which it's being out, you really gotta go look at the video, because everything we're doing in Sweetwater is top drawer, no corners cut across any place. And I hate having our hands tied not to put a really nice, and we're not talking about a motel, we're talking about a nicer, higher end hotel up front with a really nice conference center that the town of Apex desperately needs, because you all don't have meeting space anywhere. Ask Shannon, she'll tell you that right now when you all meetings, you're going to Raleigh, you're going to Cary, you're going outside, and all that revenue is going to those towns instead of staying right here.
And the trap for the hotel hotels are tough deals to do these nice ones. They're tough. They're the toughest in the real estate business. Shortest window to get them done. And yet the perfect symmetry of the hotel going into this site is the 10 or 12 restaurants we'll have, and all the outdoor dining and the rooftop bars, and all of that works together. I was vice president of Kane Realty for 8 years, back when we started the acquisition of North Hills. And I left at that point because my son wanted to come to work with.
So we need to get it to a motion here, guys.
Well, I had a question. Did we have a public hearing on this part?
The public hearing has not
been No. opened
yet.
Okay, so we need to not get that.
Yes.
done. Okay. I'm with you.
So we've had comments from the applicants. I don't know that we have anybody in the public for public comment, but I'll open it up. No? Okay. Then I'll pull this back to the board for a possible motion, one way or another.
I do want to make one comment. So I remember when this happened, and I was a little bit upset about the different owners, and I was curious whether or not the commercial would ever happen either. This was many years ago. I'm glad that it is happening. But lessons learned for all of us here, and hopefully if council listens to this. When you rezone things and you have multiple different property owners, and you rezone different things because you needed a certain amount, at that time you needed to have a certain amount for commercial for Sweetwater to exist. And now we have two landowners where one doesn't want to sell to the other, so that commercial section may not ever happen westward. So that's why I sometimes are a little bit of a stickler saying, would this project stand on its own?
Right.
Because now we have where this would be great if Staley Smith were to decide to sell this property, it'd be a non-issue. Put a bigger hotel, make it a bigger development.
The west, young man.
But he's
West.
he's not. So just lessons learned for everybody moving forward. If you own it, let it all be, if one person do the whole thing, and this section is all gonna be commercial, all one owner, and then do it that way. It's just, we get these problems coming back. And I feel like I absolutely want to approve this, because I think that would be a great spot for a hotel. Love the idea. But cutting off access for DOT to be able to put an interchange there, that's just a tough pill to swallow.
Yes, it is.
So just lessons learned moving forward, not that anything,
Very relevant.
okay.
So do we have a motion? Ryan, you were leading towards one earlier.
Yes. Go ahead, Ryan.
Please.
Pitch the ball. Pitch it. I like it.
I would make a motion to approve this, and with a modification to striking that final condition such that it doesn't eliminate DOT's ability to create a diamond interchange. Because honestly, it's going to be a council decision. All the merits that these guys have presented, I 100% think it's great for the town. However, as a planning board member, we got to look out for the future 2050 plan. And fiscally, to have a developer be more successful, the town might benefit, great, but the rest of Apex is probably going to be like, we wish we had that damn interchange. And I'm sure the people out there, the Preston Development boys that are doing Chatham Park, they want to get those people back into the triangle, and golly day. So, I don't know. I'd like to have it both ways here. I don't know how we could change that condition, though.
So is your motion to approve it as long as they reinstate section 2.2 and the half a sentence above it? Is that your motion? I'm on.
Recommending the same thing as staff, that might be easier.
Sure.
Right.
Here you go. Thank you.
I should have started with
Recommending
that.
staff.
I believe.
We had to work our way backwards to where you already were.
Allow us to come full circle.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I second that motion.
So we have a first and a second. Okay. And then we'll take it to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
We'll let council deal with it. Thank you, no worries.
Hey, it's a rehearsal.
Oh, no, we kind of.
Rehearsal. It's a rehearsal.
It's fine, we're good, thank you.
All right, Lauren. Item number 8, 22 CZ 04, 804, 808 Wimberley Road.
It was good afternoon earlier, now it's good evening. So,
This evening, night.
good evening. This is for zoning case 22 CZ 04 for 804 and 808 Wimberley Road. It's located in this general area outside of our ETJ in Wake County. The subject properties total 5.84 acres and are located on the west side of Wimberley Road and north of Castleberry Estates. There are residential structures located on both properties. The property is currently zoned Wake County Residential ADW. The adjacent zonings are to the north and west, Wake County R ADW. To the south, Plan Unit Development Conditional Zoning, and to the east, we have Wake County R ADW with a small portion of Plan Unit Development Conditional Zoning. The applicant is proposing to rezone the properties to rural residential conditional zoning. The 2045 land use map identifies the subject properties as rural density residential. The proposed rezoning to rural residential conditional zoning is not consistent with that land use classification. If their properties are zoned as proposed, the 2045 land use map will automatically be amended to low density residential per North Carolina General Statute 160D 605A. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on January 10th, 2022, and a copy of the neighborhood report is in your packet. A full list of the proposed uses and zoning conditions can be found on page 2 of the staff report. The applicant is proposing a single-family and accessory apartment. Besides the residential architectural conditions we typically see, I also wanted to point out a few. For the first one, a maximum of 0.75 dwelling units per acre are permitted. Number 2, a minimum front setback of 65 feet from the current Wimberley right-of-way, road right-of-way for all residences. Zoning condition number 15, a number of private driveways accessing Wimberley Road shall not be increased from the existing 2 driveways. So we have one right here and one right here. The Environmental Advisory Board held a pre-application meeting for this rezoning on January 20th, 2022. The zoning conditions suggested by the EAB are listed on page 3 of the staff report, along with the applicant's responses to each condition and whether the applicant provided the conditions or not. A letter of impact from Wake County Public School System was received for this rezoning and is included in the staff report packet. Wake County Public School System indicates that school at elementary and middle grade level within the current assignment area for the proposed rezoning development are anticipated to have insufficient capacity for future students. Transportation to schools outside the current assignment area should be anticipated. School expansion or construction within the next 5 years may address concerns at middle grade levels. The 2045 land use map designates the subject properties as rural density residential. If the properties are rezoned as proposed, the 2045 land use map will automatically be amended to low density residential per North Carolina General Statute 160D 605A. The current density of the properties to be rezoned is greater than the 1 unit per 5 acres supported by the current land use map classification. Furthermore, the density of the Castleberry Estates subdivision, which is right here, show you better, to the south, is 1 unit per acre as it was rezoned before the adoption of the advanced apex. The proposed rezoning is reasonable as the applicant has proposed a density of 0.75 units per acre, which is lower than the subdivision to the south. The proposed rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest because it will permit single-family residential development consistent and compatible with the surrounding area. In addition, the proposed rezoning will allow the properties to connect to water and sewer services. Planning staff can recommend approval with conditions by the applicant. I'm here to answer questions as well as our applicant.
Do we have any questions?
So this is going to be 4 houses, 4 single-family houses.
If they did a recombination plat, yes, sir.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
And I can let the applicant speak to any of those questions specifically.
Does the applicant want to say anything?
Hey, how you doing? Zach Shipman, Shipman Engineering. I'm representing the property owner. The intent of what we're trying to do is the owner wants to build a second house. There's 2 lots there now. He wants to build a second house on the second lot. Just to add a little context, there is an on-site septic system for the existing house to the south. That system is starting to show some signs of distress. And so really what we're trying to do is connect sewer to the south. Didn't seem reasonable to extend another on-site septic system with soils that are, not the best. So at this moment, we are not planning on 4 houses. We included that density in there just in the event that years from now, if somebody ever wanted to build an additional unit on there. But at the moment, we're only planning for 2 units, 2 lots in, 2 lots out, just for a second unit.
So there was the existing house foundation on the north there that's closer to Wimberley Road. Is that the site of the second house that you?
That's correct,
presented?
right. So what we are proposing to do is remove that foundation and then shuffle the lot lines a little bit so that they meet minimum dimensional standards, and then build a second house, probably somewhere in the same setback as the existing house is now, just with access to public utilities.
And there's water existing along the frontage, and then
Correct.
sewer's already stubbed from the estates on the south?
That's correct.
I drive by this house every day, and I gotta say, it's one of the most pretty houses on Wimberley. You guys have done a lot of work on the stonework, is impeccable. It was a travesty when there was a cul-de-sac stub to your pool in the backyard, but hey, that's, the least we could do is give you sewer. No further questions. I think I'm ready for a motion on this.
Public comments?
Do we have anybody here for a public hearing for this particular case, 22 CZ04? All right, no, I will close the public hearing section and bring it back to the board for a possible motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I have a motion from Mr. Akers. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
A second, Keith. Thank you. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposing? Passes unanimously.
Thank you, appreciate it.
All right, that brings us to new business. Item 1, Amanda Bunce. UDOs.
Make a motion.
Couple of them, and it's probably not enough water.
You told us we were done. No, she didn't. She did not. I tried to tie her down. She said, no, we'll never be done, never.
To adjourn.
That's right. All right, so the first set of amendments is quite a comprehensive package, and essentially the start of this was to create the Downtown Festival District, which was born out of the downtown plan that was adopted a couple years ago. And so what you see here is the purpose of the Downtown Festival District is basically to encourage a diversity of activities and programming, allowing more outdoor entertainment options while being cognizant of the surrounding residential neighborhoods. And this map generally shows the boundaries from William Street and along the Salem corridor up to Hunter Street Park, and then some parcels off to the east and west a bit as well. So that's the general boundaries that is the proposed boundaries of the Downtown Festival District. So while we were working on this district, we also looked at other things that needed to change, and some of that affects downtown, but some of the changes affect all the rest of the jurisdiction as well. So with regard to the central business district, which is the real core of downtown, we noticed that there were references to outdoor storage and a requirement to only allow outdoor display and sales rentals in accordance with a site plan. We want to allow that by right. We want to encourage that activity, the sidewalk sales and other activity on the sidewalk. So that's why subsection 1 here is being struck. And then also we noticed that we needed to remove the word storage, because what we have downtown, what we want downtown is not storage, it's sales or display. And so striking that word, that's the reason for that. And there's a lot of amendments here, so if there's a question at any time, please interrupt. Okay. I'm not really sure where to pause in all this.
And with the outdoor stuff on downtown, what the fire and EMS have to think about that with sidewalks?
Well, we already have a standard that you have to have a 36-inch clear accessible path, and that's not proposed to change.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. So the next change is to the promotional event standards, which falls under temporary uses and structures. And what we're doing with this is really adding some clarification for when these standards apply. So for-profit promotional events are those events that occur outside of a building, not including outdoor service areas used on a regular basis for such business. And so essentially, if it's, something that's completely unrelated to the business at hand in the parking lot, like Doherty's has for their St. Patrick's Day stuff, that would be, a promotional event. But anything that's happened in a regular outdoor seating area that's approved on a site plan, that would not require a promotional event permit. And so, as we're seeing with the amendments going forward, there's a lot of differentiation now between what's happening inside the Downtown Festival District and what's happening outside. So outside the Downtown Festival District, we're clarifying the frequency and duration. Currently, it's no more than 3 promotional events lasting no more than 14 days. Not many promotional events last for 14 days. Kind of harkens back to the grand opening sales, closing business sales, when the sign ordinance was all tied in with this. But that's not necessarily typical anymore. So what we're proposing is that we modify this, that basically a business would choose at each calendar year which of these 2 options they want, either 3 promotional events limited to no more than 14 days in length, which means they could have like a Tuesday, Friday, Saturday in one week and a Tuesday, Friday, Saturday in the next week, like a music series, like restaurants may have. Or no more than 6 promotional events shall occur at any one business per calendar year that lasts no more than 1 day in length. And then within the Downtown Festival District, no more than 1 promotional event per month per business, and it's limited to 1 day in length. And any outdoor areas, since it's a more frequent, any outdoor areas associated with the promotional event shall be located at least 45 feet from a residential zoning district or conforming detached single-family dwelling, and this would not include the high-density multifamily or mixed office residential retail zoning districts. So also associated with this are some changes to alcohol-related uses. One is to change the bar, nightclub, wine bar, tap room from allowed only with a special use permit to a use by right. And also to change restaurant general within the Tech Flex zoning district to a use by right. And then for all of the uses where alcohol is an issue, proposing to strike the standard that differentiates them based upon their percent of quarterly sales that are related to alcohol. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to enforce. It's been problematic for us, so we're proposing to strike it from all of these uses. And also clarifying that, bars can include sell, service, and consumption of food.
I have a question real quick
Yep.
about that. A lot of people are going to this special district like downtown Raleigh, downtown Durham, downtown
Yes.
Cary about alcohol sales, and especially in concert with this special event.
Yeah, so that's called a social district, and that's to allow the alcohol in the right of way. So either, for people to take their alcohol from one place, walk down the sidewalk to another place within a defined area. The way the state law was written, there's some tweaking that needs to happen because they didn't write it perfectly. Imagine. And so there's some work that needs to be done on that. Diane sat in on a call with ABC Commission lawyers.
It's not
So
CDO, it's town code.
It's-
So
Okay.
Yeah, right, that's all related in town
I
code.
was just looking at some of this and I was like, I wonder if like you wanted to increase your special event to include your frontage in the right of way, would that be something that?
No,
Okay.
they're actually two separate
It's two
things.
separate things.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, under the current law, it's just the way it works.
Right, so an amendment to town code would be necessary to create that social district, and we may end up having to wait till state law is clarified and improved. So for all the uses, I'm not gonna belabor this, striking that 49% part of the definitions. So we're also creating a definition for outdoor operations, and that would be an area designated for seating, food or beverage service, entertainment, or other similar activities located outside the primary business. It is exactly what you think it is. So, and the reason for adding that definition is that we're proposing standards for all of these uses. It's the same standards. So for bar, nightclub, wine bar, tap room, restaurant general, retail sales general, and all of the microbrews, brewery, distillery, micro distillery. Outside the downtown festival district, the outdoor operations shall not be located within 100 feet of a residential zoning district. And outdoor live or recorded acoustic or amplified entertainment shall not be permitted on properties directly adjacent to a conforming single-family detached dwelling, except when approved according to the standards for promotional events. So in this case, if you're more than 100 feet away and you're not adjacent to a single-family property, then, and you've got, a designated stage and outdoor music area, seating, whatever, then you could have that as part of your regular business. But you would have to use up your promotional event allowance if you were adjacent to a single family.
Is there a decibel rating?
The noise ordinance would apply for that. There is a decibel rating depending upon what the adjacent use is and time of day.
Okay.
And so within the downtown festival district, we're shortening that radius for the setback for outdoor operations to 45 feet. And the same standard would apply for outdoor live or recorded music. And when we initially sent this out, we realized Diane picked up on later, we're making it actually more restrictive for inside the festival district. We want that to be the more permissive. So the standard there in subsection 2 would be the same in both cases. And so this is the standard for all of those uses. It's the same. Any questions on the alcohol stuff before we move on to the last part of this set of amendments? Okay. The last change is related to parking. And so we are wanting to propose the use parking garage and parking lot public to differentiate it from commercial parking garage and lot. That's currently in the UDOs. As you can see, we've proposed that to be allowed in the same zoning districts as commercial parking lots. The difference is, and we're adding definitions for public so that it's owned and maintained by the town, and it can include a public-private partnership. The difference is here. So a commercial parking lot shall not be located within the downtown festival district. We want to ensure that properties are used for retail activity uses unless it's a project that the town is undertaking for the good of the downtown district or the town as a whole. And proposing that some additional standards for parking lot, garage, or public as well, that within the downtown festival district, they shall not be located immediately adjacent to Salem Street, so we want to keep them off of the main commercial corridor. And that they meet design standards, that the first floor shall be wrapped with a non-residential use, so we still have that activity on the ground floor, and that at least 75% of the exterior be brick.
Can I ask a question on that one?
Sure.
If you have engineering challenges from topography, environmental, et cetera, is there a way around that first floor non-residential on the parking structure? If not facing public right away, for example?
It's gonna be public, so the council has two choices. They either can do, what's called basically it's a deviation. They can just sign off on it, or, they can always change the UDO if they need to. But we really wanted this in here because we wanted for the public to know the intent is not to just have a parking garage.
Sure.
Parking lot. We want it to be activated and have business on that.
Sure, I'm just thinking,
Yes,
like,
they've got two mechanisms.
sounds like the first is quite easily just a stroke during, yeah. It's good to be the king.
All right. So that's the end of this set of amendments in this report.
So you need a motion on He's here, all right. So we have a motion on the first. Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Mark, second.
Mark.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
All right, these will be quicker.
And two.
Round two.
All right, Amanda.
So the
Dating.
the first amendment is actually requested by the Planning Committee of Town Council, and that is to require that vape and tobacco stores be located at least 1,000 feet from any public or private school. So basically, these uses fall under the use retail sales general. It's not the tobacco section of a grocery store. This is a store where its primary use is selling vape and tobacco products, and that the distance be 1,000 feet from a school.
What happens in cases like at the, across from the crossroads where there's like that tobacco shop with that fails as a school? They're like right next door.
It would become a legally non-conforming use, and so that it could stay. I mean, you have a similar example of a use across from Apex Middle. There's a vape store across William Street there. But so it would become legally non-conforming, meaning it could stay. Even another similar store could move in as long as that use did not cease for more than 6 months. The next amendment is to the defects guarantee section. So this is that basically like a warranty period, a guarantee period for infrastructure improvements that go in with new development. And the desire is to set different standards for residential subdivisions and non-residential subdivisions. So for residential, the period would be 1 year from completion of performance inspection, or 75% of the residential lots in the phase have been issued a CO, and it's the longer of those two. And for non-residential, the guarantees for no less than 1 year from performance inspection, or 50% of the lots in the bonded phase have been issued a CO. And this was requested from Development Services, Water Resources staff. And the last amendment is clarification. So I don't remember how long ago we amended a couple years ago, we amended the standards for building height downtown so that if developments met certain design standards, they were allowed to get different height. Well, those standards should have only been placed in the footnote, but, you know, getting happy with the bold strike through underline, changed it in the standard base height as well. That was not the intent, and it was not explained that way. It was explained that the standard is still 2 stories and 36 feet unless you do meet these 5 standards below. And so this is to basically make that right. And that's it. Planning staff's recommending approval.
Do we have a motion for,
I move we approve this as Amanda just presented it.
do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ryan, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposing? Passes unanimously. I need one more motion, please, folks.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
That was the quickest I've ever.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.